Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Unexplained Files. Tonight we're peeling back the layers on a story that, for many, is the genesis of modern conspiracy culture. It is a case that started with a small-town news bulletin and spiraled into a decades-long saga of alleged government cover-ups, alien bodies, and technology that could change the world. We are, of course, talking about the Roswell incident. How did a few scattered pieces of debris in the New Mexico desert become the most famous and fiercely debated UFO event in history? Before we dive into the mystery, if you're as fascinated by the unknown as I am, please hit that like and subscribe button. It helps us find more stories that deserve to be told. And while you're there, drop a comment below with a mystery you think is due for a new look. All right, turn down the lights, get comfortable, and let's begin our investigation. You are in the heart of the American Southwest. The year is 1947. The world is still catching its breath from the Second World War, and a new, colder conflict is beginning to cast a long shadow across the globe. This is a time of profound change and simmering anxiety. Atomic power is a new and terrifying reality. The sound barrier has just been broken, and the sky, once a familiar canopy, is suddenly filled with new possibilities and new fears. The era of the flying saucer has just begun. Only a few weeks prior, a private pilot named Kenneth Arnold reported seeing 9 shining crescent-shaped objects flying at incredible speeds near Mount Rainier in Washington. The press coined the term, and now people everywhere are looking up, their imaginations ignited. You find yourself in central New Mexico, a landscape of vast empty spaces. The sun here beats down with an unforgiving intensity, bleaching the color from the high desert plains that stretch for eternity in every direction. It's a place of stark beauty, of sprawling ranches measured not in acres, but in square miles, where the silence is so profound you can hear the whisper of the wind as it snakes through the scrub brush and arroyos. This is a land that keeps its secrets well, and it's a land dominated by the presence of the United States military. Not far from here is the White Sands Missile Range, a sprawling test site for captured German V-2 rockets. And closer still, just outside the small, unassuming town of Roswell, is the Roswell Army Airfield. This isn't just any airbase. It's home to the 509th Bomb Group, the one and only atomic-equipped bomb squadron on the entire planet. These are the men who dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They are the tip of America's military spear, guardians of the nation's most powerful and secret weapons. The sky above you is, quite literally, one of the most sensitive and heavily monitored airspaces in the world. Now you feel the atmosphere begin to shift. It's the evening of July 2nd, or perhaps the 3rd. The exact date is lost to the haze of memory. A storm is rolling in. But as you watch it approach, you notice something is off. This isn't a typical summer monsoon. Witnesses would later describe it as a violent, almost bizarre electrical storm. The lightning is incessant, a furious strobing web that tears across the dark sky, arcing from cloud to cloud and from cloud to ground. Yet there's little rain to accompany it. The air is thick with ozone and the percussive blast of thunder that echoes across the plains like artillery fire. It feels unnatural, charged with a strange and volatile energy. You are on the Foster Ranch, a massive sheep and cattle operation about 75 miles northwest of Roswell. It's managed by a man named W.W. Brazel, though everyone calls him Mac. He's a plain-spoken, hard-working rancher, a man more comfortable with the rhythms of the land than with the politics of the wider world. He's heard the talk of flying saucers on the radio, dismissing it as nonsense. Tonight, as the storm rages, Mac Brazel and a young boy staying with him, William D. Proctor, are hunkered down, listening to the thunder. Then, through the cacophony, they hear something else. It's a sound that doesn't belong. Some would later describe it as a tremendous, drawn-out explosion, not like thunder but something more mechanical, more final. Others reported a high-pitched whining sound that seemed to slice through the storm's roar. It's a sound that suggests something has gone terribly wrong up there, in the violent heart of the lightning. It's a noise that makes the hair on your arms stand up, a brief, violent punctuation mark in the sky before the storm's roar swallows it whole again. The lightning continues to flash, illuminating the desolate landscape in stark, momentary flashes of black and white. For a moment, you imagine something hurtling through that chaos, something broken and out of control, falling towards the dark, empty expanse of the desert floor below. The storm eventually passes, leaving behind a profound silence and the clean, rain-washed scent of creosote. Nothing seems different. The world looks the same as it did before. But something has changed. Something is now lying out there in the darkness, waiting to be found. This is where the story truly begins, not with a flash of light, but with a sound, and with the aftermath of a storm that was, by many accounts, anything but ordinary. The established fact is that a severe thunderstorm did pass through the region on that night. That is a matter of meteorological record. A lesser-known detail, however, is the sheer insistence by multiple separate witnesses over the years on the storm's peculiar dry and electrical nature, leading some to theorize that the storm itself was not the cause of the crash, but perhaps an effect of a catastrophic failure of an exotic propulsion system interacting with the atmosphere. It's a fringe idea, certainly, but it's one born from the uncanny consistency in witness descriptions. This brings us to a critical question. When looking back across a span of more than 70 years, how much can we trust human memory of a weather event? And how easily could a simple, albeit severe thunderstorm be reimagined as something more sinister to better fit a spectacular narrative? The night gives way to the blinding light of a New Mexico morning. A day or two passes. The memory of the storm begins to fade, becoming just another story of the volatile desert weather. You are with Mac Brazel now, as he sets out on horseback to do his rounds. The air is still and clean. The daily routine of a rancher is dictated by the needs of his livestock, and Brazel's sheep had been scattered and spooked by the storm. His primary concern is to check on them, to make sure none were harmed by the lightning or had wandered too far. He rides with the 7-year-old son of his neighbors, D. Proctor, who often accompanies him. The landscape is familiar, a terrain he knows as well as the back of his own hand. He knows every dip and rise, every rocky outcrop. It's this deep familiarity that makes the anomaly so jarring. As you crest a low rise, you see it. The pasture is disturbed. At first, you might think it's just the aftermath of a flash flood, but a closer look reveals something far stranger. There isn't a crater, not the kind of single, violent hole you'd expect from an impact. Instead, you see a long, shallow furrow scraped into the earth as if something heavy had glanced off the ground at a low angle, scarring the land for several hundred feet. And then you see the wreckage. It isn't in one place. It's strewn across an enormous area, a corridor of debris that stretches, by Brazel's later estimation, nearly 3/4 of a mile long and is perhaps 200 or 300 feet wide. The sheer scale of it is baffling. Whatever happened here, it didn't just fall, it seems to have disintegrated, scattering itself over the chaparral. You dismount your horse, the creak of the leather saddle the only sound in the immense silence. You take a tentative step forward into the field of debris. Your first impression is one of profound strangeness. Brazel is a man of the earth. He's seen downed weather balloons before. They were a common sight in this part of the country. He's seen the wreckage of a conventional airplane. This is neither. There's no large, recognizable piece of fuselage, no engine block, no wires, no vacuum tubes, no propellers. Most unnervingly, there is no sign of a fire. Just this, confetti. You bend down and pick up a piece of the most common material. It's a thin, foil-like substance, silvery and reflective. It looks like metal, but as you hold it, it feels like nothing. It's virtually weightless in your hand. You try to crumple it into a ball. It folds easily under the pressure of your fingers, compressing into a tight little wad. But then, as you relax your grip and open your palm, an astonishing thing happens. The foil begins to unfold itself. Like a living thing, it expands back to its original shape, smoothing itself out until not a single crease or wrinkle remains. You try it again, folding it, creasing it hard, but the result is the same. It's metal with a perfect, instantaneous memory. You've never seen or imagined anything like it. Nearby, you spot small, structural beams, akin to miniature I-beams, the longest perhaps a couple of feet in length. You pick one up. Like the foil, it's impossibly light, as if it were made of balsa wood, but when you try to bend it over your knee, it won't give. It feels rigid, indestructible. Brazel would later say he took out his pocket knife and tried to whittle a piece off to scratch its surface, but the blade simply slid off without leaving a mark. And then you notice the markings. On the inner surfaces of some of these beams are strange characters, etched in a color that witnesses would later describe as violet, lavender, or a faded pink. You lean in closer to examine them. They are not letters from any alphabet you recognize. Not English, not Russian, not Japanese. They look more like hieroglyphs, but they are not Egyptian. They are composed of geometric shapes, patterns that seem to almost resemble flowers and animals arranged in columns. It's a form of writing that feels ancient and utterly alien at the same time. You continue to walk the field, your sense of disbelief growing with every step. You find pieces of a black, brittle, plastic-like substance. It looks like bakelite, a common material of the era. But when you try to burn a piece with a lighter, the flame won't mark it. It won't get hot. There are also reports of thread-like material, almost like silk, but with the strength of wire, and bits of what looked like parchment. Throughout the entire vast field, there is not one piece you can identify. For a man like Mac Brazel, this is deeply unsettling. His world is one of tangible, understandable things. This debris is an affront to common sense. He spends some time gathering a sample of the most peculiar pieces, stuffing them into a burlap sack. He thinks it must be some kind of government experiment. With the 509th Bomb Group just down the road and the White Sands missile test to the south, secret projects falling from the sky wasn't an outlandish idea. But this material, this felt different. This felt advanced in a way he couldn't comprehend. He loads the sack onto his horse and heads home, the strange, weightless debris clutched in his hands, his mind reeling. The silence of the desert no longer feels peaceful. It feels watchful. The established fact here is, of course, that Mac Brazel found this field of debris. This is the inciting incident, the single event that no one, not even the Air Force, disputes. The lesser-known detail that adds a layer of complexity is the description of the long gouge in the earth. Most retellings focus solely on the scattered debris, which fits the narrative of a mid-air explosion, like that of a balloon array. A long furrow in the ground, however, suggests a more solid object making physical, sustained contact with the terrain before its eventual demise. It hints at a controlled or semi-controlled descent rather than a simple, random scattering. So you must ask yourself, if you were a rancher in 1947, with a limited formal education and no knowledge of advanced material science, how would you describe the components of a top-secret, high-altitude surveillance device? Could the exotic properties of the memory metal and unbreakable beam simply be your best attempt to describe unfamiliar, but entirely terrestrial materials like reinforced mylar, composite plastics, and lightweight balsa wood coated in foil? A couple of days pass. You can imagine Mac Brazel at his remote ranch house, the strange, otherworldly debris sitting in a shed. It's a tangible mystery that disrupts the quiet rhythm of his life. He shows it to his wife and kids. He shows it to his neighbors, the Proctors. They handle the peculiar foil that remembers its shape. They run their fingers over the strange purple symbols on the rigid, lightweight beams. No one knows what to make of it. This isn't just a curiosity anymore. It's a problem. The debris field is vast, and his sheep are liable to wander through it, perhaps even ingest some of the smaller pieces. More than that, there's a nagging sense of civic duty. In the post-war atmosphere of 1947, with talk of spies and Soviet secrets, finding wreckage from an unknown experimental craft wasn't something you just ignored. So on Saturday, July 5th, you travel with Brazel as he makes the long, dusty drive into Roswell. You see the world through his eyes. The endless expanse of the highway shimmering in the heat, the slow approach of civilization as the first few buildings of the town appear on the horizon. Roswell is a typical small town of its time, a community hub for the ranchers and military families in the surrounding area. It's the kind of place where everyone knows everyone else. As you drive into the center of town, you head for the Chavez County Courthouse, a sturdy, respectable building that houses the office of Sheriff George Wilcox. You walk with Brazel into the sheriff's office. The air inside is cooler, smelling of old paper and stale cigarette smoke. Sheriff Wilcox is a man of the law in a quiet county. His days are usually filled with minor disputes, lost cattle, and the occasional drunk and disorderly. He is not a man accustomed to dealing with the extraordinary. You watch as Brazel upends his burlap sack, spilling a small sample of the strange debris onto the sheriff's wooden desk. The silvery foil, the odd plastic-like fragments, and one of the small beams with its hieroglyphic markings now sit under the harsh office lights. You see the look on Sheriff Wilcox's face. It's a mixture of confusion and intrigue. He picks up the memory foil, crumples it in his fist as Brazel instructs, and watches dumbfounded as it springs back into its original shape. He examines the I-beam, noting its impossible lightness and the bizarre symbols. He runs his thumb over them. This isn't from a car, a tractor, or any farm equipment he's ever seen, and it certainly doesn't look like any part of an airplane he can identify. Brazel explains where he found it, the sheer size of the debris field, the gouge in the earth. The more he talks, the more serious the sheriff becomes. Wilcox knows this is far above his pay grade. His jurisdiction ends where national security begins. The proximity of the 509th Bomb Group is the dominant fact of life in Roswell, and any unidentified aerial wreckage found in its backyard is, by definition, a military matter. The possibility that this could be a new type of Soviet spy craft, a captured German V-2 rocket that went astray, or most likely wreckage from a top-secret American project, means he has one clear course of action. He has to make a call. You can almost hear the click and whir of the rotary phone as the sheriff places the call to the Roswell Army airfield. It's a call that will change everything. He asks to be put through to the intelligence office. On the other end of the line, he gets a man named Major Jesse Marcel. Wilcox explains the situation. A local rancher has brought in some very strange material from a crash site out in the county. The description he gives is enough to pique the major's interest. Unidentified wreckage, strange properties, unusual symbols. These are all red flags for an intelligence officer in the most sensitive military base in the country. This isn't just a local sheriff dealing with a piece of junk that fell in a field. This is now an official military concern. The wheels of a much larger, more powerful machine have begun to turn. Major Marcel tells the sheriff he'll be right down to look at the material himself. For Mac Brazel, the simple rancher, the story is now out of his hands. He has done his duty and reported his findings. He has no idea that this simple act will upend his life and launch a mystery that will still be debated 3/4 of a century later. The established fact is that Sheriff Wilcox did indeed call the Roswell Army airfield, and that this call directly led to the involvement of Major Jesse Marcel. This is the crucial link in the chain of events, the moment the incident officially crossed from civilian observation to military investigation. A lesser-known detail, often lost in the more sensational aspects of the story, is the reaction of Sheriff Wilcox's family. His daughter, Barbara, would later recall her father's profound and lasting disturbance by the event. She claimed he was deeply shaken, not just by the debris but by the subsequent interactions with the military, who allegedly told him and his family to never speak of the incident again, under threat of severe consequences. This personal, familial account paints a picture not just of a confused lawman, but of a frightened one. And so we are left with a vital question. What could a small-town sheriff have seen or been told that would so intimidate him into a lifelong silence? A silence so complete that it was maintained even with his own children until many years later. The air in Sheriff Wilcox's office is thick with anticipation. The call has been made. The civilian world has handed its mystery over to the military. You don't have to wait long. The door opens, and 2 men in uniform step inside. One of them is the man who will become the central figure in this entire affair, Major Jesse Marcel. You need to understand who this man is. He is not some paper pusher, not a low-level officer. Jesse Marcel is the intelligence officer for the 509th Bomb Group. He holds a top-secret security clearance. He's a veteran of the Second World War, where he flew dozens of combat missions in B-24 bombers over Europe and earned multiple air medals. His job, his entire professional life, is centered on the identification of aircraft and foreign technology. He is trained to recognize anything that flies, whether it's American, British, German, or Soviet. He is, by any reasonable measure, an expert witness. With him is another man, Captain Sheridan Cabot, from the Counterintelligence Corps. His presence adds another layer of seriousness to the situation. This isn't just about identifying wreckage anymore. It's about security, about secrets. You watch as Marcel approaches the sheriff's desk. There's no hint of amusement in his expression, only a focused, professional curiosity. He runs his hand over the pile of debris, then picks up the silvery foil. You see a flicker in his eyes as he crumples it, then watches it unfold itself in his palm, perfectly smooth. He examines the I-beam, testing its weight and rigidity. He turns it over and studies the strange purplish symbols. You can see the gears turning in his mind. He's running through a mental checklist of every known material, every known aircraft. Nothing fits. This isn't the aluminum skin of a plane. It's not the neoprene and foil of a weather balloon. It's not a V-2 rocket. It's nothing he has ever seen or read about in any intelligence briefing. Marcel knows instantly that this is something that needs to be seen in situ. A handful of fragments on a desk tells only a fraction of the story. He turns to Mac Brazel. He needs to go to the source. Brazel, a simple rancher now standing in his dusty work clothes beside two decorated military officers, finds himself swept up in a matter of national importance. He agrees to take them. The decision is made to drive out to the ranch immediately. You travel with them, leaving the relative comfort of Roswell behind and heading back out into the desolate expanse of the high desert. The sun is beginning to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in fiery shades of orange and red. The mood in the car is quiet, tense. By the time you arrive at the remote Foster Ranch, darkness has fallen. A search in the pitch black of the desert is impossible. They will have to wait for morning. You can imagine the long, restless night at the ranch house. The strange debris is out there, lying under the vast, star-dusted sky. For Marcel, this could be the discovery of a lifetime. For Brazel, it's a disruption he never asked for. The next morning, Monday, July 7th, they rise at dawn. You follow the three men, Marcel, Cavett, and Brazel, as they head out on horseback to the site. And then you see it, just as Marcel does. The rising sun glints off hundreds, perhaps thousands, of pieces of metallic debris scattered across the landscape. The scene is far more extensive and impressive than the small pile in the sheriff's office could ever suggest. You watch Marcel's reaction. He is utterly captivated. He dismounts and begins to walk the field, his head down, examining every fragment. He spends hours out there, in the quiet of the morning, collecting samples. He fills his vehicle with the material, the memory foil, the unbreakable beams with their cryptic symbols, the black plastic that won't burn. His excitement is palpable. He is convinced he is holding the remnants of a genuine flying saucer. In his mind, it's the only explanation that fits the evidence in front of him. He has found it. The 509th, the world's only atomic bomb group, has recovered a crashed flying disc. The established fact here is that Major Jesse Marcel personally investigated the debris field and collected a significant amount of the material for analysis. His role as the primary investigating officer from the base is a matter of public record. But here is a lesser-known detail that complicates the picture: the behavior of the other officer, Captain Cavett. According to Marcel's later testimony, Cavett was strangely aloof and disinterested during the entire investigation. While Marcel was excitedly gathering every piece he could find, Cavett allegedly picked up a few pieces, dismissed them as unimportant, and went back to the vehicle showing little to no curiosity. This has led to a persistent fringe theory that Cavett was not there as a standard investigator, but as a minder, a specialist from a higher authority sent to control the situation, downplay the findings from the very start, and ensure the official narrative, whatever it was going to be, was maintained. Why would a counterintelligence officer, whose job is to investigate anomalies, show absolutely no interest in one of the most anomalous debris fields imaginable? And this forces you to ask a crucial question about the main witness. Given Jesse Marcel's extensive experience as a combat pilot and a base intelligence officer, how could he so catastrophically misidentify the debris from a common weather balloon, an object he had certainly seen before, as something not of this world? You are now in the car with Major Jesse Marcel, driving through the pre-dawn darkness on the long road back to Roswell. The vehicle is loaded with the strange, unearthly cargo. The excitement is electric. Marcel isn't just following orders. He believes he is at the center of the single most important event in human history. He is so overwhelmed by the significance of his discovery that he doesn't drive straight to the base. Instead, he makes a detour. He pulls up to his own house. It's the middle of the night, but he goes inside and wakes his wife and his 11-year-old son, Jesse Jr. He tells them he has something they need to see, something they'll remember for the rest of their lives. You are there in the kitchen as he brings in an armful of the debris and spreads it out on the floor. You see it through the eyes of a child, the dull metallic sheen of the foil under the single kitchen light, the small gray eye beams that are as light as wood. Jesse Jr. would later recall this moment with perfect clarity. He remembers his father's words, "You'll never see anything like this again." He picks up one of the beams and sees the strange symbols, the purple hieroglyphic-like characters that look like no writing he's ever seen in his school books. He and his father try to piece some of the debris together, like a puzzle, but none of it seems to fit. They are looking at the constituent parts of a technology so advanced it might as well be magic. After this brief historic show and tell, Marcel gathers the pieces, leaves his family in a state of wonder, and continues on to the base. It is now the morning of Tuesday, July 8th. You follow Marcel as he walks into the office of his commanding officer, Colonel William Butch Blanchard. Blanchard is the commander of the 509th Bomb Group. He is a formidable figure, a West Point graduate, a decorated and respected leader responsible for the nation's entire nuclear arsenal. He is not a man given to flights of fancy. Marcel lays the debris out for his commander. You watch as Colonel Blanchard puts the material through the same battery of tests. He tries to bend the beams, he examines the strange foil. He looks at the symbols. He confers with Marcel, listening to the intelligence officer's report about the massive debris field. Blanchard, like Marcel, cannot identify the material. It corresponds to nothing in any U.S. military inventory. This is the critical decision point. What do you do? The standard procedure for unidentified wreckage would be to handle it quietly, sending it up the chain of command for analysis under a blanket of complete secrecy. But Colonel Blanchard makes a different and truly astonishing decision. He decides to go public. You can only speculate as to his reasoning. Perhaps he believed the discovery was too monumental to keep secret. Perhaps he was worried it would be squashed by higher-ups and wanted to get the story out before that could happen. Or perhaps he simply believed the public had a right to know. Whatever the reason, he summons the base's public information officer, Lieutenant Walter Haut, to his office. You are now with Walter Haut, a young lieutenant whose job is to manage the base's relationship with the press. He walks into the colonel's office and receives a direct, unambiguous order. Colonel Blanchard tells him to write a press release announcing that the 509th has come into possession of a crashed flying disc. You see Haut sitting at his typewriter, the words from his commanding officer still ringing in his ears. He composes a short, succinct statement. The key passage reads, "The many rumors regarding the flying disc became a reality yesterday when the intelligence office of the 509th Bomb Group of the 8th Air Force Roswell Army Airfield was fortunate enough to gain possession of a disc through the cooperation of one of the local ranchers in the sheriff's office of Chaves County." He finishes typing, pulls the paper from the roller, and following his orders, hand delivers it to the town's 2 radio stations and its 2 newspapers. You can feel the moment the spark hits the powder. At radio station KGFL, a young news director named Frank Joyce gets the release. He immediately recognizes its explosive potential. This isn't a civilian report. This is an official military statement. He calls Walter Haut to confirm it's not a prank. Haut assures him it is a legitimate release from the colonel himself. Joyce types it up and sends it out on the Associated Press wire service. Within minutes, the story is everywhere. It's clattering over teletype machines in newsrooms across the country and via radio transmission, the world. For a few extraordinary hours on July 8, 1947, the official position of the United States Army Air Forces was that they had captured a flying saucer. The story of a lifetime had just broken, and the world held its breath waiting for what would come next. The established, undeniable fact is that this press release was written and distributed. The Roswell Daily Record ran it as their banner headline. It is a historical artifact. The lesser-known detail lies in the specific and forceful nature of Colonel Blanchard's order, as Walter Haut would later attest in a deathbed affidavit. It wasn't a suggestion or a collaborative decision. It was a direct command to announce the recovery of a disc. This implies a level of certainty and conviction on Blanchard's part that is difficult to reconcile with a simple mistake. It paints a picture of a commander who was absolutely sure of what he held in his hands. This leads us to the most perplexing question of the entire incident. Why would Colonel Butch Blanchard, a man entrusted with the planet's most dangerous weapons and steeped in a culture of military secrecy, risk his entire career national security and potential global panic by authorizing such a sensational public statement if the object in question was something as mundane and easily identifiable as a weather balloon? The story is out. For a few brief, chaotic hours, the world is buzzing with the official confirmation that a flying saucer has been captured. You can imagine the scene in the corridors of power. The teletype machines at 8th Air Force Headquarters in Fort Worth, Texas are clattering nonstop. In Washington, D.C. at the Pentagon, alarms are surely going off. The 509th Bomb Group has gone on the record with a story that has staggering implications for national and global security. The situation is out of control, and it must be contained. Immediately. The phone rings in Colonel Blanchard's office in Roswell. On the line is his direct superior, General Roger Ramey, commander of the 8th Air Force. You can imagine the tone of that conversation is anything but pleasant. General Ramey is a powerful 3-star general, a man not known for his patience. He wants answers. He issues a direct order. Colonel Blanchard is to cease all communication with the press. Furthermore, he is to have the recovered material and his intelligence officer, Major Marcel, flown to Fort Worth Army Airfield at once. He wants to see this supposed flying disc for himself. You are with Major Marcel as he carefully packs the debris he collected from the ranch. He chooses the most significant pieces, the UN creasable foil, the unbreakable beams with the alien markings, and loads them onto a B-29 Superfortress, the same type of plane that dropped the atomic bombs. As the powerful engines roar to life, you take off from Roswell, leaving a media storm in your wake, carrying a secret that you believe will change the world. The flight to Fort Worth is filled with a sense of purpose. Marcel is the man of the hour, the one delivering the proof. You land at the airfield in Fort Worth and are escorted directly to General Ramey's office. You feel the weight of history as Marcel, carrying the boxes of debris, enters to brief his commanding general. And it is here that the official story takes a sharp, brutal turn into the realm of high conspiracy. According to Jesse Marcel's adamant testimony for the rest of his life, this is what happened next. He enters the office and lays the authentic, otherworldly debris on the general's floor. Ramey looks it over, as does his chief of staff, Colonel Thomas Dubose. They don't say much. Then General Ramey suggests they go look at a map in the adjoining room to show him precisely where the debris was found. Marcel leaves the debris on the floor and accompanies the general into the map room. They are only gone for a few minutes. When you walk back into the general's office, the scene has changed. The debris you brought from Roswell, the material you saw with your own eyes on the ranch, is gone. In its place, strewn across the carpet, is a pathetic collection of torn silver paper, splintered balsa wood sticks, and scraps of faded, perished neoprene rubber. It's the wreckage of a common weather balloon and its accompanying Rowan radar target. It looks nothing like what you brought with you. You see the look of confusion and shock on Marcel's face. Before he can protest, the press is ushered into the room. You are now part of a hastily assembled press conference. General Ramey, a picture of calm authority, explains to the reporters that there has been a regrettable error. The personnel back in Roswell, he explains with a dismissive air, were simply not familiar with these types of high-altitude weather devices and got a little overexcited. He points to the flimsy wreckage on the floor as proof. This, he says, is what caused all the fuss. Then, in a moment of calculated stagecraft, he orders Major Jesse Marcel to kneel down and pose for pictures with the wreckage. You watch as Marcel, his face a mask of humiliation and confusion, is forced to hold up a piece of the flimsy radar reflector for the cameras. The flashbulbs pop, capturing the iconic images that will define the incident for the next 30 years. The message is unequivocal. It was a mistake. The story is dead. The established fact is the press conference itself. General Ramey did present weather balloon debris to the press on July 8th, and the resulting photographs of him and Marcel were published worldwide, effectively killing the story. A fascinating and controversial lesser-known detail, however, has emerged from those very photographs. In several shots, General Ramey is seen holding a telex message. For decades, the text was an unreadable blur. But with modern high-resolution scanning and digital analysis, researchers claim to have deciphered keywords and phrases. They claim the text reads in part, "As the victims of the wreck you forwarded," and mentions something in the disk. If this analysis, known as the Ramey memo theory, is correct, it means that at the very moment Ramey was publicly declaring the object a weather balloon, he was holding a private message that discussed a disk, a wreck, and, most chillingly, victims. And this raises a profoundly unsettling question. If the Roswell debris was so clearly and obviously from a weather balloon, why was it necessary to fly it hundreds of miles under guard to a high-level command base, only to be identified by a general? Couldn't any experienced airman like Colonel Blanchard or Major Marcel have made that simple identification back in Roswell, averting the entire global media incident before it even began? The flashbulbs fade. The reporters, satisfied with their new mundane headline, begin to file out of General Ramey's office. The weather balloon story is official, and the Roswell incident is, for all intents and purposes, a closed case. But for the men at the center of the storm, the ordeal is just beginning. You stay with Major Jesse Marcel as the last of the journalists departs. The professional demeanor of the generals in the room evaporates. The atmosphere becomes cold, hard, and unmistakably threatening. You are witnessing a dressing down of the highest order. Marcel is taken aside. He is no longer the hero of a great discovery. He is the cause of a serious problem. He is told by General Ramey in no uncertain terms that he was mistaken. What he saw was a weather balloon. What he brought to Fort Worth was a weather balloon. His duty now is to concur with that assessment. You can see the conflict on his face. He knows what he saw. He knows the feel of the memory foil and the sight of the strange hieroglyphs, but he is a soldier. He is standing before a 3-star general. The order is not a suggestion, it is a command, wrapped in the ironclad authority of the military hierarchy. He is to forget what he thought he saw. He is to never again speak of the real debris, not to his wife, not to his son, not to anyone. It is a matter of national security. The unspoken threat hangs heavy in the air. His career, his reputation, his future in the Air Force all depend on his compliance. He has been given his story. His role now is to stick to it for the rest of his life. While Marcel is being silenced in Fort Worth, a different, more personal drama is unfolding back in New Mexico. You are now with Mac Brazel, the rancher who started it all. The military has not forgotten him. While the world's attention was on the press conference, a group of officers has escorted Brazel from his ranch into Roswell. He isn't formally arrested, but you understand he is not free to leave. He is taken to the guest quarters at the Roswell Army Airfield. For the better part of a week, he is detained and interrogated. You see him in a room sitting in a simple chair, as a rotating cast of serious uniformed men ask him the same questions over and over again. What exactly did he see? What did the material look like? How big was the debris field? Crucially, who else did he tell? Who else saw the debris? Did he keep any of it for himself? The experience is designed to be intimidating. You can see the toll it takes on him. This is a man who values his independence, his quiet life. He is now caught in the gears of a machine he cannot comprehend. He is told that he has stumbled into a matter of grave importance to the security of the United States. He is sworn to secrecy, made to understand that speaking about what he really found could have dire consequences. Finally, after days of this psychological pressure, the military decides he is ready. But they don't just send him home. They have one final, crucial task for him to perform. You walk with Brazel and his military escort to the offices of the Roswell Daily Record. This is the same newspaper that, just a day or two earlier, had run the sensational headline about a captured flying saucer, based on his discovery. Now, you watch as he sits down with a reporter and tells a very different story. He looks tired, worn down. He speaks in a hesitant, almost robotic monotone. He says he thinks he made a mistake. He's seen weather balloons before, and on second thought, this might have just been an unusual one. He mentions the tinfoil, the rubber, the sticks, the very components of the wreckage displayed in General Ramey's office. He says he's sorry for all the trouble he's caused. It's a complete and total recantation of his original excited report to Sheriff Wilcox. With his new story on the record, the military's work is done. They release him and he finally returns to the solitude of his ranch, a profoundly changed man, scared into a silence he would maintain for the rest of his days. The established fact is Mac Brazel's detention and his subsequent recantation. His coached interview with the Roswell Daily Record on July 9th is a matter of historical record, providing the final nail in the coffin for the flying saucer narrative of 1947. A lesser-known detail, supported by the testimony of neighbors and family friends, is what was allegedly happening at the Foster Ranch while Brazel was being held. According to these accounts, the military dispatched a large team of soldiers who cordoned off the entire debris field. For several days, they conducted a meticulous sweep of the area, a process often described as a fingertip search, picking up every last visible scrap of the anomalous material until nothing remained. This wasn't just about controlling the story. It was about sanitizing the crime scene, erasing every trace of the physical evidence from the face of the earth. So the critical question becomes this: if the debris was simply a weather balloon, a common and harmless piece of scientific equipment, why would the United States Army Air Forces find it necessary to deploy such extraordinary measures, detaining and intimidating a civilian witness for days and allegedly launching a full-scale cleanup operation, all for a simple case of mistaken identity? The curtain of silence falls, and it is absolute. For 30 years, the Roswell incident vanishes. It becomes a non-story, a forgotten, slightly embarrassing local news item about an overzealous airbase. Mac Brazel lives out his life in intimidated silence, never again speaking of the strange debris that disrupted his world. Major Jesse Marcel continues his Air Force career, eventually retiring, but the order from General Ramey is an anchor he carries with him, a secret he keeps locked away. The world moves on. The Cold War deepens, the space race begins, humanity takes its first steps on the moon. And all the while, the memory of what lay on the desert floor remains dormant, waiting. Now let the years fall away. It is the late 1970s. The key players are older. The threats that held them in silence have faded with time. Researchers, intrigued by the lingering whispers of the story, begin to seek them out. And the memories, preserved for decades, come flooding back. Let's step away from the timeline of events, from the cover-up and the press releases, and focus on the very heart of the mystery, the material itself. You are holding in your hands the debris as it was described by those who were there. You are feeling what they felt. First, you pick up the most famous component, the material that has since entered the lexicon of ufology as memory metal. It's a piece of thin metallic foil. The first thing you notice is its impossible lightness. It has the weight of a ghost. Witnesses described it as being lighter than aluminum foil, almost weightless. It's silvery on one side and a duller, grayish black on the other. It's incredibly thin, thinner than the foil from a candy bar wrapper. Yet you find you cannot tear it. You can't even make a dent in it with a heavy tool. The core of its mystery, however, is revealed when you test its plasticity. You gather the foil in your hand and squeeze it into a tight, compact ball. It offers no resistance. Then, you open your palm. What you witness is something that defies all conventional physics of the era. The crumpled ball of foil begins to move. It stirs, expands, and unfolds itself, smoothing out every single wrinkle and crease until it lies perfectly flat on your palm, as pristine as it was before you crushed it. It remembers its original shape perfectly and instantaneously. In 1947, this was pure magic. Today we have a name for this concept: shape memory alloys. But even our most advanced materials do not exhibit the flawless, immediate perfection described by the Roswell witnesses. Next, you examine one of the small I-beams. It's about 2 feet long and weighs next to nothing. You could balance it on your fingertip. Jesse Marcel Jr. described it as being no heavier than a balsa wood beam. But its appearance is deceiving. You try to bend it. It won't yield. You place it on the ground and try to dent it with a sledgehammer, as Major Marcel claimed he did. The hammer bounces off without leaving so much as a scratch. It is a material that possesses a complete contradiction of properties. The density of a light wood with the strength of high-grade steel. And then there are the symbols. You run your finger along the inner channel of the beam. The markings are not painted, stamped, or engraved. They feel raised, an integral part of the metal itself, as if they were cast into the beam when it was formed. You hold it to the light and the characters glow with a faint purplish-pink luminescence. They are graceful, geometric, a complex tapestry of lines, circles, and curves that seem to tantalize you with a meaning you can never hope to grasp. The established facts of the modern Roswell case are built upon these witness testimonies, recorded decades after the event. The consistency of the descriptions of the debris' unusual properties, provided by multiple independent witnesses like Jesse Marcel Sr. and Jr., and the families of Mac Brazel and Sheriff Wilcox, is the foundation on which all subsequent research rests. A more obscure, lesser-known detail that emerges from some of these accounts is the seamless nature of the wreckage. Witnesses occasionally noted that there were no discernible signs of manufacturing, no rivets, no screws, no welds. The various components seemed to be fused or molded together, suggesting a construction technology that was fundamentally different from the nuts and bolts assembly of all terrestrial aircraft. It's a small detail, but it hints at a level of technological sophistication that is in some ways even more profound than the memory metal itself. This forensic reconstruction of the debris, based entirely on memory, forces you to ask a difficult question. The witnesses describing these fantastic materials were, for the most part, not trained scientists or engineers. They were soldiers and ranchers using the language of ordinary people to describe the extraordinary. How much of what they described was an accurate, objective account of physical properties, and how much might have been the product of awe, confusion, and the natural tendency for memory to embellish a dramatic event over time? Could the unbreakable beams and magical memory foil simply be their best attempt to describe novel, but still man-made, materials from a secret project they simply didn't have the vocabulary to explain? The memories of the debris are vivid, consistent, and deeply strange. They paint a picture of a technology far beyond anything known in 1947. But as compelling as these descriptions are, they lead to a stark and unavoidable question. What Mac Brazel discovered on the Foster Ranch was a debris field. It was not a crash site. You can walk the entire 3/4 of a mile, picking up pieces of memory foil and unbreakable beams, but you will not find a fuselage, an engine, a cockpit, or a single body. It's as if a vehicle exploded or shed its outer layers in mid-flight, scattering its lightest components across the desert like metallic chaff. But if that's the case, where is the rest of it? Physics dictates that the heavier, denser parts of the craft, the core structure, the power source, the occupants, would have continued along their trajectory, eventually succumbing to gravity and impacting the Earth elsewhere. The Foster Ranch site, then, is not the end of the story. It is merely the beginning of the crash sequence. To find the potential end of the story, you must leave the rolling pastures near Corona and travel west. You drive for hours, about 150 miles as the crow flies, across the vast, arid heart of New Mexico. The landscape becomes even more stark, more desolate. You arrive at a place called the Plains of San Agustin. This is a massive, flat expanse, an ancient, dried-up lakebed surrounded by distant mountains. It is one of the most remote and sparsely populated areas in the continental United States. If you wanted a place for a secret to fall from the sky and remain undisturbed, you could hardly choose a better location. It is here, according to a second parallel narrative of the Roswell incident, that the main event took place. The primary witness for this second site is a man named Grady Barney Barnett, a soil conservation engineer for the U.S. government. His story did not emerge until the late 1970s, told to friends and family and eventually to UFO researchers. According to Barnett, he was working in the field on the plains of San Agustin in early July of 1947. As you stand with him under the brutal New Mexico sun, he spots something glinting in the distance. His curiosity piqued. He walks toward it. What he finds is not a field of scattered debris, but a single, largely intact object buried partially in the sandy soil. You are there as he approaches it. It is a dull, metallic, disc-shaped craft, perhaps 25 or 30 feet in diameter, and shaped something like an egg. It's not crumpled or shattered into 1,000 pieces. It seems to have skidded into the ground, plowing a long furrow before coming to rest. A large gash is torn in its side, revealing a glimpse of the interior. And then you see them. Lying on the ground, thrown clear of the wreckage, are several small bodies. You take a step closer, your heart pounding. They are not human. They are slight, frail beings, maybe 4 feet tall, with spindly arms and legs. Their heads are disproportionately large and pear-shaped, completely bald. They have no visible ears or noses, only small openings. Their mouths are simple, thin slits, but it's the eyes that freeze you in place. They are huge, dark, and set far apart, wrapped partially around the sides of the head. As you stand there in stunned silence, Barnett claims he could see at least one other similar body still inside the fractured craft. His solitary discovery doesn't last long. While he's trying to process the impossible scene before him, a group of what he thought were archaeology students from a nearby university also arrive, drawn to the same strange sight. Before anyone can get too close, however, you hear the rumble of an engine. A large military truck appears, kicking up a cloud of dust as it speeds toward the site. Soldiers pour out, weapons in hand, and quickly secure the perimeter. An officer takes charge, his face grim. He informs Barnett and the others that they have stumbled upon a top-secret government crash. He tells them it is their patriotic duty to forget everything they have seen. He makes it clear that their silence is a matter of national security, and that the consequences for speaking about this would be permanent. They are then escorted from the area, forced to turn their backs on the strange, silent craft and its even stranger occupants. As the military begins the methodical work of recovery, the established fact is that the original 1947 accounts from the Roswell area only ever mention the debris field. There is no contemporary record of a second site, a craft, or bodies. The story of Barney Barnett and the plains of San Agustin is the quintessential fringe theory of the Roswell incident. It is a narrative that emerged 3 decades after the event, and while it provides a convenient and dramatic solution to the missing craft and crew, it rests almost entirely on the second-hand testimony of what one man claimed to have seen. Researchers have struggled to verify key aspects of his account, from his exact location on those dates to the identity of the archaeology students he mentioned. Yet this story is crucial. It is the bridge that connects a mysterious debris field to a full-blown flying saucer crash with alien casualties. It transforms the entire event. And this transformation forces a critical question. Did this second crash narrative emerge because it was a repressed truth finally coming to light? Or was it a piece of folklore, a narrative upgrade created decades later to make the original more ambiguous story more complete, more sensational, and ultimately more satisfying? The story of a second crash site on the plains of San Agustin is explosive. It provides the bodies, the intact craft, and the dramatic military confrontation that the original story lacks. But it is also a narrative that is geographically and chronologically difficult to pin down, resting almost entirely on the uncorroborated account of one man. So let's leave the desolate plains and the story of Barney Barnett behind for a moment. Let's travel back to the town of Roswell itself in those frantic days of July 1947. Let's see if the ripples of such a monumental event, the recovery of a crashed vehicle and its non-human occupants, can be detected not in the desert, but within the community itself. You need to look for the practical, logistical consequences of such a discovery. If the military recovered bodies, they would have a very specific, very unusual problem on their hands, and they might just need to ask a professional for help. You are now inside the Ballard Funeral Home on Main Street in Roswell. It's a quiet, respectable business that serves the small community. You are with a young man named Glenn Dennis. He's an apprentice mortician, learning the trade, a polite and diligent young man doing a job that most people would rather not think about. The Ballard Funeral Home, crucially, holds the contract for mortuary and ambulance services for the Roswell Army Airfield. This means when there's an accident on the base, Glenn Dennis is one of the people who gets the call. This professional connection places him in a unique position to witness things that ordinary civilians would not. It is late in the afternoon, on that strange Tuesday, July 8th. The flying saucer story has been announced, but it has not yet been retracted. The phone on the wall rings. You watch as Dennis answers it. On the other end of the line is a man who identifies himself as the mortuary officer from the base. After a brief professional greeting, the officer begins to ask a series of bizarre and unsettling questions. You listen in, your own sense of confusion mirroring Dennis's. The officer wants to know how many hermetically sealed caskets Dennis has in stock. Specifically, he's interested in child-sized ones. What is the smallest size available? How quickly could he get more? The questions then become even stranger. The officer asks for Dennis's professional advice on preserving bodies that have been lying out in the desert for several days. He asks about the best way to handle tissue and fluids that might be contaminated by an unknown biological or chemical element. You can see the perplexed look on Glenn Dennis's face. Child-sized caskets? There have been no accidents, no plane crashes involving families from the base. Why would they need multiple hermetically sealed child-sized coffins? And the questions about preserving contaminated remains are equally baffling. Dennis, trying to be helpful, asks the officer what kind of situation he's dealing with, but the man on the other end is evasive, saying only that it's a sensitive matter and that he'll call back if they need anything. The line goes dead, leaving Dennis in a state of deep unease. Later that same day, the funeral home gets another call from the base. An airman has been in a minor accident and needs to be transported to the base hospital. Dennis is part of the crew that takes the ambulance. You ride with him as you drive through the gates of the Roswell Army Airfield and pull up to the infirmary. As he's helping the airman out, he notices a strange and frantic scene unfolding at the back of the hospital, near the emergency loading dock. 2 military field ambulances are parked there, their rear doors wide open. The area is swarming with military police, who are barking orders and keeping everyone away. You see them carrying pieces of wreckage out of one of the ambulances. You catch a glimpse of a large curved piece of metal that looks, as Dennis would later describe it, like the bottom of a canoe, with strange, unfamiliar symbols etched on its surface. And you smell something. A thick, unpleasant odor hangs in the air, a biological smell that Dennis would later describe as smelling like nothing he had ever encountered before or since. His professional curiosity piqued. Dennis gets out of his ambulance and tries to enter the hospital to find a friend of his, a nurse who works there. He's immediately intercepted by a stern, red-headed military police captain. The captain demands to know who he is and what he's doing there. Before Dennis can fully explain, he is told in no uncertain terms to leave. "You get the hell out of here," the captain allegedly says. "If you don't, you'll be in a lot of trouble." The threat is palpable. He is told to forget what he saw, to never speak of it, or he'd find himself in a pine box. He is then physically escorted away, the strange smell and the sight of the wreckage and the frantic activity seared into his mind. The established fact that provides a foothold for this story is that the Ballard Funeral Home did indeed have an official contract with the Roswell Army Airfield. Glenn Dennis was verifiably an employee there at the time, placing him in the right place, at the right time, to have been contacted. The lesser-known detail from his testimony that strengthens the case for authenticity is his description of the debris he saw at the hospital. His mention of a canoe-shaped piece of metal with strange symbols on it provides an independent, corroborating echo of the I-beams with hieroglyphs described by a completely separate witness, Jesse Marcel Jr. This cross-witness consistency is what researchers find so compelling. But this story, which Dennis only told publicly for the first time in 1989, raises a serious question about human memory. Is it truly possible for a person to recall the precise details of multiple phone calls and tense conversations more than 40 years after they occurred? Or is it more likely that his memory, however sincere, was subtly colored and reshaped over the decades by the Roswell mythology that was growing around him, filling in the gaps with details that made for a more coherent and dramatic story? You are back with Glenn Dennis, the young mortician, moments after he has been forcefully ejected from the Roswell Army Airfield Hospital. He is shaken, not just by the physical threat, but by the sheer intensity of the secrecy surrounding the loading dock. His mind is a whirlwind of questions. The bizarre phone call about child-sized caskets, the strange canoe-shaped wreckage with its cryptic symbols, the overpowering and unfamiliar smell, and now the explicit threat against his life. He knows something extraordinary and dangerous is happening on that base, but his concern is also personal. He has a friend who works as a nurse in that very hospital. He is worried for her safety and consumed by the need to understand what she might have been forced to witness. The next day, you are with him as he manages to get a message to her. Her response is telling. She is terrified, but agrees to meet him. The meeting is not casual. It's clandestine, arranged for a quiet corner of the base coffee shop. You are there, sitting at the table, the air thick with fear and paranoia. When she arrives, you can see the trauma in her eyes. She is pale, her hands are trembling, and she speaks in a hushed, urgent whisper, constantly looking over her shoulder. She tells Glenn that she is risking everything by talking to him. Then, the story comes tumbling out. You listen, mesmerized as she describes the events of the previous day from inside the hospital. She tells Dennis that she was called into an examination room to assist 2 military doctors. On stainless steel gurneys in the room were several bodies, the source of the foul odor Dennis had smelled. But they were not the bodies of any pilots or airmen. They were, she insists, not human. She was a trained medical professional, accustomed to the grim realities of anatomy and death. What she saw in that room, she says, violated every principle of known biology. You lean in closer as she describes them, her voice cracking. The bodies were small, incredibly frail, about the size of a 10-year-old child, which immediately explains the strange phone call Dennis received. Their heads were massive and pear-shaped, completely out of proportion to their thin necks and torsos. Their skin was a grayish, almost translucent color and smooth with no hair anywhere on their bodies. Their faces were an unnerving collection of minimalist features, a thin horizontal slit for a mouth, 2 small openings where a nose should be, no discernible earlobes, just small holes on the sides of their heads. And their eyes were huge, black and deeply set with no visible iris or pupil, giving them a hollow, insect-like appearance. She describes how she had to help the doctors with a preliminary makeshift autopsy. The doctors were struggling, cutting into the bodies and finding an internal organ structure that was completely alien to them. The smell, she says, was overpowering, a biological stench that was both sweet and sickening. She talks about the hands of the creatures. She says they had 4 long, slender fingers on each hand but no thumb. And on the tips of each finger she noticed small circular pads, almost like suction cups. To make her point, you watch as she grabs a napkin and a pen from the table. Her hand is shaking, but she sketches a diagram of one of the hands showing the 4 long fingers and the suction cup tips, trying to give Dennis a tangible piece of evidence of the impossible thing she saw. Her story ends with a chilling confirmation of the threat Dennis received. She tells him that after the examination was complete, all military personnel who had been involved, doctors, nurses, MPs, everyone, were herded into a briefing room. A high-ranking officer, a colonel or perhaps even a general, addressed them. He told them that what they had witnessed was a matter of the highest national security. They were all forced to swear an oath of absolute and total secrecy. The officer made it clear that this was not a typical military oath. He warned them that if any one of them ever spoke a single word of what they saw or did, not only would they spend the rest of their lives in a military prison, but their families would be made to disappear. The threat was absolute. They would be erased from existence. Then she delivers the final blow. She tells Dennis that she and every other person involved in the incident were being immediately and permanently transferred. She had received her orders that morning. She was being flown to a base in England the very next day. This meeting with him is her only chance to say goodbye, and with that, she stands up to leave, a terrified woman about to be swallowed by the military's machinery of silence. Dennis would never see or hear from his friend, the nurse, ever again. The historical fact that lends this incredible story a veneer of plausibility is the military's established practice during that era. The sudden, no-questions-asked transfer of personnel involved in sensitive or classified projects was a standard operating procedure for maintaining security. A nurse involved in a top-secret incident being shipped overseas overnight is, Within the context of the 1940s military, entirely believable. The core of this section, however, the nurse's entire testimony, is the ultimate fringe theory, a second-hand account of an anonymous and unverifiable witness. A powerful but lesser-known detail within this story is the napkin sketch of the alien hand. It's a detail that attempts to ground the fantastic verbal testimony in a physical documented act, making it feel more real. But this entire narrative forces us to confront a critical question about the nature of evidence. When a story is this extraordinary, is a second-hand account, no matter how detailed or compelling, ever enough? Since the nurse is conveniently anonymous and untraceable, is her story a genuine repressed testimony? Or is she a narrative construct, a necessary character invented to provide the details that no verifiable witness could? The stories of Barney Barnett and the anonymous nurse are tantalizing. They provide a complete, dramatic, and horrifying narrative of a crashed alien spacecraft and its deceased crew. But they are also stories built on a fragile foundation, the unverified memory of one man and the second-hand account of another. They are tales told from the edge of the Roswell mythology, impossible to prove and equally impossible to definitively disprove. So now, let's take a step back from the world of hearsay and secret autopsies and return to the physical evidence. Let's return to a witness who is not anonymous, not unverifiable, but a man of science and a man of the military. Let's return to the one person, aside from his father, who can claim to have touched the real Roswell debris before it vanished forever. You need to remember who Jesse Marcel Jr. became. The 11-year-old boy you met in his kitchen in the middle of the night grew up to lead a remarkable life. He became a medical doctor. He joined the U.S. Navy and became a flight surgeon. He later transferred to the Army National Guard, where he served for decades, eventually retiring as a full colonel. In 2004, at the age of 66, he was called out of retirement to serve as a flight surgeon for a helicopter squadron in Iraq. He was a respected physician, a decorated officer, a man who dedicated his life to service and to science. He was not a man prone to fantasy or exaggeration, and for his entire adult life he told one consistent story about what happened on that night in July of 1947. Let's go back there. You are that 11-year-old boy again, asleep in your bed. It's after midnight. Your father, Major Jesse Marcel, the base intelligence officer, gently shakes you awake. The tone in his voice is one you've never heard before, a mixture of hushed urgency and pure, unadulterated excitement. He tells you and your mother to come into the kitchen. He has something to show you that you will never see again. You follow him, rubbing the sleep from your eyes into the stark light of the kitchen, and there, on the linoleum floor, he spreads out a collection of the most unusual material you have ever seen. Your father has just come from the debris field on the Foster Ranch, and he has brought a sample of his discovery home before taking it to the base. For the next hour, the three of you sit on the kitchen floor examining the pieces of a puzzle from another world. You see the foil. Your father takes a piece, crumples it into a ball, and tells you to watch. You see it unfold in his hand, smoothing itself out until it is perfectly flat, confirming the memory metal property from a second direct eyewitness. But your attention is drawn to something else. Among the debris are several small grayish I-beam-like structures. You pick one up. It's incredibly light, like a piece of balsa wood from one of your model airplanes. It feels sturdy, but it weighs almost nothing. And then you see the markings. Running along the smooth, concave inner surface of the beam is a line of strange symbols. You run your little finger over them. They feel slightly raised, embossed into the metal itself. They are not painted or written on the surface. They seem to be an integral part of the beam's construction. You lean in for a closer look. Under the kitchen light, they have a distinct color, a shade of purple or violet that seems to shift in the light. The characters themselves are beautiful and baffling. They are not letters or numbers. They are geometric shapes, triangles, circles, squares, and graceful flowing lines that look almost like artistic renditions of plants or animals. You and your father try to fit some of the pieces together, thinking it might be a type of script that reads in a certain order, but nothing lines up. It's a language you cannot comprehend, etched into a material you cannot identify. This moment, this tactile memory of holding that impossible object, is what Dr. Jesse Marcel Jr. would carry with him for the rest of his life. The established fact is Jesse Marcel Jr.'s identity and his lifelong, unwavering testimony. His story never changed. From his first public interviews in the 1980s until his death in 2013, he provided a credible, first-hand, corroborating account for his father's claims, making it infinitely harder to dismiss the story as the ramblings of a single, mistaken officer. A lesser-known detail that he would often emphasize was the specific character of the symbols. He insisted they were not etched or engraved in the way a human would machine a part. He described it as if the metal itself had been molded with these symbols as an inherent feature, a detail that speaks to a manufacturing process far beyond 1947 capabilities. This unwavering testimony from such a credible man leads to a critical question that pits memory against character. Jesse Marcel Jr. was only 11 years old when this happened. While his adult integrity is beyond reproach, how much weight can we place on the memory of a child, recalled decades later? Could his father, his powerful conviction, and the family's subsequent experiences have subtly shaped and solidified a child's wondrous but perhaps hazy memory into the precise, confident testimony he would give for the rest of his life? You have now heard the stories. The accounts of decorated soldiers, of small-town morticians, of respected doctors, and of frightened nurses. You've heard of memory metal, unbreakable beams, and strange, non-human bodies. The narrative, built from the long-suppressed memories of dozens of witnesses, points overwhelmingly toward one conclusion. Something not of this earth crashed in the New Mexico desert. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, this narrative has taken firm root in the public consciousness. Books have been written. Television documentaries have aired. The story of Roswell is no longer a forgotten local myth. It's a global phenomenon. And with this renewed interest comes renewed pressure. The public, and even members of the U.S. Congress, begin demanding answers. The simple 1947 explanation, that it was all just a weather balloon, is now laughable in the face of so much detailed, contradictory testimony. The United States Air Force, the successor to the Army Air Forces of 1947, finds itself backed into a corner. It has to say something. In 1994, after a lengthy internal investigation prompted by the General Accounting Office, the Air Force decides to finally set the record straight. You are present for a press conference that will, once again, attempt to close the book on Roswell forever. An Air Force official steps up to the podium and makes a startling admission. He concedes that the object that crashed near Roswell was not a weather balloon. He admits that the story told by General Ramey in 1947 was, in fact, a cover story. You can feel a ripple of vindication in the room. The witnesses were right all along. But then comes the twist. The cover story, the Air Force explains, was not put in place to hide a crashed flying saucer. It was put in place to protect one of the most sensitive and secret intelligence-gathering programs of the early Cold War. The real culprit, they announce, was a project with a code name that sounds like something from a spy novel, Project Mogul. You listen as the details of this once top-secret program are laid bare. In the tense years after World War II, the United States was desperate to know if and when the Soviet Union would successfully test its own atomic bomb. Project Mogul was a brilliant, if unconventional, attempt to create an early warning system. The theory was that sound is channeled and can travel for immense distances in a specific layer of the upper atmosphere, much like a natural sound pipe. The goal of Project Mogul was to launch massive balloon arrays carrying highly sensitive microphones into this atmospheric layer, to listen for the acoustic signature of a distant nuclear detonation on the other side of the world. This wasn't just a single balloon. You need to picture what was actually floating in the sky. It was a colossal 600-foot-long train of up to 24 large neoprene weather balloons, linked together like a string of pearls. Trailing beneath this massive lifting apparatus was a long, dangling tail of scientific equipment. And here, the Air Force presents what it considers to be the smoking gun. In order to track these massive high-altitude arrays, they were equipped with radar reflectors. These reflectors, the Air Force explains, were the source of all the mythology. They were built for the project under contract by a toy company in New York. They were flimsy, kite-like structures made of balsa wood sticks, glued together into triangular and hexagonal shapes, and covered with a foil-backed paper. Here, the official explanation seems to click perfectly into place. The unusual lightweight beams that Mac Brazel and Jesse Marcel described. The Air Force says these were the balsa wood sticks of the radar targets. The strange, silvery foil? That was the foil backing on the paper. And what about the most specific and compelling detail of all, the strange purple hieroglyphs? The Air Force has an answer for that too. The contractor, the toy company, used a heavy-duty, reinforced adhesive tape to assemble some of these radar targets. This tape, it turns out, was decorated with whimsical geometric patterns, some described as flower-like or heart-shaped, and it was often pinkish or purple in color. You are shown images from the declassified project files. There they are, balsa wood sticks, foil paper, and patterned colored tape. The Air Force presents this as the definitive solution. They claim that Project Mogul Flight Number 4, launched from Alamogordo, New Mexico, went missing right around the time of the incident and drifted directly over the Foster Ranch. The secrecy was paramount. The military response was necessary to protect the program from Soviet spies, and the witnesses, simple folk with no knowledge of classified projects, simply misinterpreted the strange but entirely terrestrial materials they found. The existence of Project Mogul is now a well-established historical fact. Declassified documents confirm its mission, its methods, and the materials used. The fact that this project was real, top secret, and operating in the exact time and place of the Roswell incident provides the strongest pillar for the official government explanation. A lesser-known detail that seems to powerfully support the Air Force's case is the nature of the patterned tape used on the radar reflectors. The fact that a toy company using leftover stock applied a purple, flower-patterned tape to a top-secret military project is one of those bizarre quirks of history that sounds almost too perfect to be false, and it seems to directly explain the hieroglyphs' testimony. But does this explanation, as neat and well-documented as it is, truly satisfy the evidence? It forces a critical question. Could the materials of Project Mogul, balsa wood paper and tape, truly account for the detailed, consistent, and visceral testimony of the first-hand witnesses who claimed they handled unbreakable beams and a metal that magically repaired itself? Or has the United States Air Force simply replaced a simple 1947-era cover story with a far more sophisticated and better researched one for the 1990s? You have now been presented with the official solution to the Roswell riddle, Project Mogul. It's a compelling, well-documented, and intelligent explanation. You have to admit, on the surface, it works remarkably well. It accounts for the timing, the location, and the undeniable need for extreme secrecy that could easily explain the military OR's heavy-handed response and subsequent cover-up. It even provides a seemingly perfect, if wonderfully bizarre, explanation for the infamous hieroglyphs in the form of a toy company's patterned adhesive tape. For many people, and certainly for the United States Air Force, this is where the story ends. The mystery is solved, the file is closed. A secret Cold War balloon project was mistaken for a flying saucer. But you are an investigator. Your job is not to accept the official story, but to test it. Let's take the Project Mogul explanation and hold it up to the bright, unforgiving light of the eyewitness testimony you've already heard. Let's see if it holds. First, you must examine the core materials. The Air Force claims the unbreakable beams were nothing more than balsa wood sticks from the radar reflectors. You can go to any hobby shop and pick up a balsa wood stick. You feel its lightness, yes, but you also feel its fragility. You can snap it with your bare hands. You can easily shave pieces from it with a simple pocket knife. Now you must place this reality next to the vivid, consistent memory of the witnesses. Remember Mac Brazel, the rancher, a practical man who worked with wood and metal his entire life, taking out his knife and being unable to even scratch the surface of one of the beams. Remember Major Jesse Marcel, a military officer, claiming he took a sledgehammer to one of the beams and was unable to make a dent. Do these two descriptions, a fragile, easily broken stick and an indestructible metallic-feeling beam, describe the same object? The discrepancy is not minor. It is a fundamental contradiction of physical properties. Next, you must consider the memory metal. The official explanation is that this was the foil-backed paper used on the radar targets. Again, you can perform the experiment yourself. Take a piece of aluminum foil or foil-lined paper. Crumple it into a ball. It stays in a ball. Every single crease and fold you made is permanently impressed upon its surface. Now place this next to the testimony of Jesse Marcel Sr., Jesse Marcel Jr., and others. They describe a material that, when crumpled, would unfold itself on their open palm, returning to its original, perfectly smooth state as if by magic. This isn't a subtle difference in interpretation. It is the difference between a normal, inanimate material and one that exhibits properties, flawless shape memory, that were pure science fiction in 1947. To accept the Mogul explanation, you must believe that multiple people on separate occasions all hallucinated this magical property when looking at simple foil paper. And what of the hieroglyphs, the strongest piece of evidence for the Mogul theory? The patterned purplish tape is a compelling match. But again, you must look closer at the testimony. Witnesses like Jesse Marcel Jr. were adamant that the symbols were not stuck on the beams. He described them as being raised, embossed, an integral part of the material itself, visible on the inner concave surface. The story from Glenn Dennis S. Nurse described symbols on a piece of wreckage in the back of an ambulance. None of the first-hand accounts describe tape stuck to wood. They describe a form of writing that was part of a metallic structure. Finally, you must consider the man at the center of the 1947 investigation, Major Jesse Marcel. He was the intelligence officer for the 509th Bomb Group. Project Mogul balloons were classified, but they were being launched from Alamogordo Army Airfield, just over the mountains from Roswell. It is almost inconceivable that an intelligence officer responsible for the most sensitive airspace in the world would not have been briefed on the existence of these massive high-altitude balloon arrays. At the very least, as an experienced pilot, he would have been intimately familiar with the appearance and materials of a weather balloon and its radar target. The Project Mogul explanation requires you to believe that this expert, this trained observer, made a mistake of such colossal proportions that it created a global incident. A mistake about an object he should have been one of the most qualified people in the country to identify correctly. The established fact is that the materials of a Mogul radar target were indeed balsa, foil paper, and tape. This is undeniable. However, a crucial, lesser-known detail is that the very scientists who built the Mogul devices, men like Professor Charles B. Moore, were interviewed by Roswell researchers in the 1990s. When they were presented with the detailed descriptions of the debris provided by the eyewitnesses, the memory foil, the unbreakable beams, they themselves stated that those descriptions did not match the materials they had used for Project Mogul. The project's own lead engineer did not recognize the description of his own creation. This puts the official story in a difficult position, forcing you to ask a pivotal question. Which scenario requires the greater leap of faith? To believe that a half-dozen credible primary witnesses, including an expert intelligence officer, all independently and simultaneously misidentified, misperceived, and misremembered nearly every single physical property of a common balloon, or to believe that they were telling the truth about finding something truly extraordinary, you've picked apart the Project Mogul theory and found it wanting. The balsa wood and foil paper explanation, while neat, seems to crumble when compared to the tactile, visceral memories of the first-hand witnesses. But the Air Force in the 1990s knew that debunking the debris was only half the battle. The modern Roswell story was no longer just about strange metal. It was about bodies. It was about a second crash site, strange phone calls to a mortician, a secret autopsy, and a terrified nurse. The 1994 Mogul report addressed none of this, leaving the most spectacular claims completely unanswered. Realizing this, the Air Force went back to work, determined to produce a final definitive document that would debunk every last aspect of the Roswell myth. In 1997, you are presented with the result of this effort, a massive 231-page report titled, with an air of finality, The Roswell Report, Case Closed. This is intended to be the last word the United States government will ever speak on the subject. The report's core argument is as complex as it is dismissive. The Air Force contends that there were no alien bodies. Instead, they argue that the stories told by witnesses decades later are the result of a psychological phenomenon they call time compression or memory blending. Their theory is that people have taken several different, completely unrelated, and entirely terrestrial events that happened at different times. the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, and have unconsciously mashed them all together in their memories, creating one single spectacular but wholly fictional event in July of 1947. You dive into the report, looking for the specific events the Air Force believes are the true source of the alien body stories. They offer two main candidates. The first is a series of high-altitude experiments conducted throughout the 1950s under programs with names like Project High Dive. The goal of these projects was to test escape systems for pilots and future astronauts. To do this, the Air Force would send massive balloons similar to the Mogul arrays into the stratosphere and drop things from them. What they were dropping were anthropomorphic test devices, or as you know them, crash test dummies. You are shown the photographs from the official files. These dummies were roughly the size and shape of an adult man, with bald heads and simplified facial features, and they were often clad in silver or white flight suits. You can see how, to a civilian stumbling upon a military recovery operation in the remote desert, the sight could be jarring. You'd see a military cordon, serious-faced soldiers, and a strange, human-like body on a stretcher being loaded onto a truck. The Air Force argues that these scenes, which happened repeatedly all over New Mexico throughout the 1950s, are the real memories behind the stories of a military recovery of non-human bodies. The timing is wrong by almost a decade, but the Air Force insists that in the haze of memory, witnesses simply confused a 1950s dummy recovery with the 1947 balloon crash. The second event the report offers up is far more grim. This is the explanation for the stories of gruesome autopsies and hurried calls to the local mortician. On June 27, 1956, a KC-97 Stratofreighter, a massive military tanker and transport plane, suffered a catastrophic engine failure after takeoff from a base in Texas and crashed in the mountains north of Roswell. All 11 crew members were killed. The crash was horrific, and the recovery of the bodies was a deeply traumatic event for the military personnel and local civilians who assisted. The remains were badly burned and dismembered. The Air Force suggests that the genuine memories of this very real 1956 tragedy, of mangled bodies, of the need for caskets, of the grim work done at the base hospital, became conflated over time with the other stories, adding the dark biological element to the growing Roswell myth. So you now have the complete official explanation. In the government's view, the Roswell incident is a fiction, a piece of modern folklore stitched together from three separate events. The 1947 crash of a secret Project Mogul balloon provided the debris story. The recovery of crash test dummies in the 1950s provided the alien body story. And a horrific military plane crash in 1956 provided the autopsy and mortician story. According to the Air Force, the witnesses are not lying. They are simply confused, their memories jumbled by time. The established fact is that the Air Force did publish the Roswell report, case closed in 1997, and it does propose this memory blending theory, citing Project High Dive dummies and the 1956 KC-97 crash as the primary sources of the body-related stories. This is the official and final U.S. government position. A lesser-known detail that severely challenges this theory, however, is the profound physical discrepancy. The anthropomorphic dummies used in the 1950s were, by design, the size of adult men, typically around 5 feet 10 inches tall and weighing 175 pounds. Yet the witness testimony, from Barney Barnett to Glenn Dennis's nurse, is strikingly consistent in describing the bodies as being small, frail, and child-sized, with disproportionately large heads. The Air Force explanation requires you to believe that witnesses not only got the year wrong by a decade, but that they also misremembered the fundamental size and shape of the bodies they saw. This leads to the critical question: is the Air Force's time compression theory a legitimate psychological explanation for how folklore is created? Or is it an unfalsifiable pseudo-scientific excuse designed to dismiss any and all inconvenient testimony? By labeling the witnesses as simply confused, does the report genuinely investigate their claims? Or does it condescendingly invalidate their experiences without ever engaging with the specifics of what they actually described? You are now in the mid-1990s, and the Roswell debate has reached a fever pitch. On one side, you have the compelling human stories of the eyewitnesses, whose decades-old memories paint a picture of a world-changing event. On the other, you have the full weight of the United States Air Force with its detailed, methodical reports on Project Mogul and crash test dummies, dismissing the entire affair as a confused jumble of unrelated events. It is a stalemate, a war of words and memories, of sworn affidavits versus declassified documents. There is no physical evidence, no smoking gun. Then, in 1995, the entire landscape of the debate is shattered. A new piece of evidence emerges, and it isn't a story or a document. It claims to be the thing itself. A film. You are introduced to a man named Ray Santilli, a London-based music and video producer. He makes a claim that is so audacious it sends shockwaves around the globe. He announces that he has come into possession of 22 reels of 16mm film, shot in 1947 by a now elderly and anonymous U.S. military cameraman. This footage, Santilli claims, is the official visual record of the recovery and, most shockingly, the autopsy of one of the alien beings recovered from the Roswell crash. The story is an immediate global sensation. A television special is quickly produced, hosted by Jonathan Frakes of Star Trek: The Next Generation, and titled Alien Autopsy, Fact or Fiction. It is broadcast in dozens of countries, and millions of people tune in, their skepticism warring with a breathless desire to see the truth. The lights dim and the footage rolls. You are watching it for the first time. The film is grainy, silent, and in stark black and white. The camera is handheld, shaking slightly, giving the scene a raw, unsettling sense of verisimilitude. You are looking into what appears to be a sterile, white-tiled medical examination room. A large surgical lamp hangs from the ceiling. A glass-windowed observation room is visible in the background. Around a central operating table stand two figures, their identities completely obscured by bulky, white, full-body contamination suits with dark helmets covering their heads. A third figure, seemingly an observer, stands by the wall, and on the table, under the harsh glare of the lights, is the body. You lean closer to your screen. The being is small and vaguely humanoid, but clearly not of this world. It has a frail, almost childlike torso, thin limbs, and a large, distended belly, almost as if it were pregnant, but your eyes are drawn to its head. It is large, bald, and bulbous, with no visible ears and a simple slit for a mouth. Its eyes are the most alien feature of all. Large, dark, almond-shaped voids, covered by a thick, black, opaque membrane, as if it were wearing a pair of built-in sunglasses. You notice its hands and feet. It has 6 long, slender fingers and 6 toes, a detail that immediately contradicts the 4-fingered hand described by Glenn Dennis's nurse. The 2 figures in the contamination suits begin the procedure. It is methodical and gruesome. You watch as one of them makes a long, deep incision down the creature's torso. They peel back the skin, revealing a collection of strange, unrecognizable organs. They remove these large, gray, spongy masses and place them in pans. The procedure continues, clinical and horrific. They move to the head. You see them use a bone saw to cut a cap from the top of the skull. They lift it away and then reach in to remove the brain, a large, dark, 2-lobed organ. For 17 minutes, the world watches in stunned, morbid fascination. This appears to be it. The proof. The smoking gun that Roswell believers had been searching for 50 years. The fallout is immediate and intense. The footage is analyzed frame by experts of every stripe. Some special effects artists declare it to be unfakeable, pointing to the subtle slump of the body and the realistic feel of the tissues. UFO researchers are fiercely divided. Some embrace it as the genuine article, the holy grail of their field. Others cry foul, pointing to numerous inconsistencies. The 6 fingers, an anachronistic wall-mounted telephone visible in one shot, and a clumsy, unprofessional autopsy technique. For years, the debate rages. Finally, in 2006, the story completely unravels. Ray Santilli admits that the film is not, in fact, an original 1947 film. He now claims it is a meticulous reconstruction of a real film he saw once, but which had since disintegrated beyond repair. Shortly after, the man who created the alien dummy and directed the reconstruction, a British special effects artist named John Humphreys, comes forward and explains exactly how he did it, using sheep brains and raspberry jam to create the internal organs. The alien autopsy film is conclusively a hoax. The established fact is that the Santilli alien autopsy film was a forgery. Both its producer and its special effects creator have admitted to its fabrication. It is a proven hoax. And yet, a strange and lesser-known detail persists. To this day, Ray Santilli clings to a modified version of his story, insisting that a real film did exist and that a handful of frames from that original footage were spliced into his reconstruction. This unprovable claim keeps a tiny ember of the mystery alive for a dedicated few, a fringe theory within a hoax. The whole affair, from global sensation to admitted fraud, forces you to ask a critical question about belief itself. Even after being completely debunked, the imagery from the Santilli film has become inextricably linked with the Roswell story in the public mind. Why does the visual of a proven fake hold such power? Does the film's massive, albeit temporary, success tell us more about the skill of the hoaxers? Or does it reveal a profound collective yearning to see proof of the extraordinary, a desire so strong that we are willing to believe our eyes even when we are being explicitly told not to? You've seen the grand, sweeping government explanations. You've witnessed the rise and fall of a spectacular television hoax. Both the official reports and the Santilli film are products of the 1990s, a time when Roswell had already become a household name. But to understand why the Air Force even needed to write a 200-page report, or why a hoax autopsy could become a global media event, you have to travel back further. You have to go back to a time when the Roswell incident was a ghost, a forgotten story known only to the handful of people who were forced to live with its secret. You are in the year 1977. For 30 years, an almost perfect silence has surrounded the events of July 1947. The weather balloon story was a complete success. Mac Brazel passed away, taking his story to the grave. Jesse Marcel quietly finished his Air Force career. The world moved on, and the Roswell story was nothing more than a few crumbling newspaper clippings in a local archive. It was, for all intents and purposes, a dead end. But history often turns on the persistence of a single, curious mind. You are introduced to a man named Stanton T. Friedman. It's important you understand who he is. Friedman is a nuclear physicist. He spent 14 years working on advanced classified research and development projects for major American corporations like General Electric and McDonnell Douglas. He is a scientist trained in methodology, data analysis, and critical thinking. In the late 1970s, Friedman is working as a lecturer, traveling the country speaking about the scientific evidence for UFOs. During his travels, a television station manager mentions a half-remembered story he heard years ago about a man who claimed to have handled the wreckage of a crashed saucer that the military had covered up. The man's name, he thought, was Marcel. This single, offhand comment becomes the spark. You follow Friedman as he begins a painstaking, difficult investigation. There is no internet, no easy way to search for people. He spends months making phone calls, writing letters, following a trail that has been cold for 3 decades. He feels like a detective hunting for a ghost. Finally, in 1978, he finds him. Living a quiet life in Louisiana is the retired Lieutenant Colonel Jesse Marcel, the former intelligence officer from the Roswell Army Airfield. You are there for that first momentous interview. You see an old man, hesitant at first, the weight of a 30-year-old gag order still heavy on his shoulders. Friedman gently coaxes the story out of him, and you can see the relief on Marcel's face as he finally unburdens himself. You hear his voice on Friedman's tape recorder, firm and unwavering, as he says the words that will reignite the entire mystery. That was no weather balloon. It wasn't any weather device. It was something I had never seen before, or since. It was not of this earth. He recounts the entire story for Friedman. The strange properties of the debris, the indestructible beams with their purple symbols, and most importantly, the humiliating cover-up in General Ramey's office, where the real debris was swapped for a phony weather balloon. This interview is the single most important event in the history of the Roswell incident since 1947. It is the first domino to fall. Armed with Marcel's incredible on-the-record testimony, Friedman teams up with author Charles Berlitz, and in 1980, they published the book The Roswell Incident. The book is an explosive success. For the first time, the public is hearing the other side of the story, not from a random civilian, but from the military officer who was in charge of the original investigation. You then witness a remarkable phenomenon. The book and the publicity surrounding it act as a signal flare, cutting through the darkness of 30 years of silence. Other people, now in their old age and free from the fear of military reprisal, begin to emerge from the shadows. You see the children of Mac Brazel, now grown adults, come forward to confirm their father's story. They talk about the real debris he brought home, and the terrifying week he was held by the military, returning a broken and intimidated man. You see the son of Sheriff Wilcox and the daughter of General Ramey come forward with their own fragments of memory. You hear from other veterans who were stationed at the base, men who weren't directly involved, but who remember the rumors on the base, the hushed talk of a crashed disc, the cordoned-off hangar, and the unusual flights leaving in the middle of the night. Each story by itself is just an anecdote, but when you place them all together, a stunningly consistent mosaic begins to form, a picture of a community that was collectively silenced. The established fact is the pivotal role of Stanton Friedman. His background as a physicist and his discovery and interview of Jesse Marcel Sr. are the well-documented origins of the modern Roswell revival. Without his work, the story would almost certainly have remained forgotten. A lesser-known detail is the initial fear and paranoia Marcel exhibited when Friedman first contacted him. He was initially suspicious that Friedman was a government agent, sent to see if he had kept his 30-year silence, a poignant testament to the lasting power of the gag order. This wave of corroborating testimony from the 1980s raises a profound question about collective memory. Is this an incredible example of a long-suppressed historical truth finally coming to light as dozens of people independently confirm the same core story? Or is it a case of mass suggestion, where the powerful, media-friendly testimony of one key figure, Jesse Marcel, provides a script that other people with their own faded and ambiguous memories begin to unconsciously adopt as their own, creating a chorus of confirmation that is compelling but ultimately unreliable? The wave of witnesses that emerged in the late 70s and 80s gave the Roswell story a new and powerful life. But even as the accounts of soldiers, townsfolk, and the families of the original players built a compelling case, one key figure remained stubbornly on the sidelines. His name was Walter Haut. You remember him. In 1947, he was Lieutenant Haut, the public information officer for the 509th Bomb Group. He was the man whose name was, metaphorically, on the single most important document in the entire affair, the press release that announced the capture of a flying disc. For more than 50 years, you could have sat down with Walter Haut and he would have told you the same simple story. He would have told you that he was just a messenger, a loyal soldier, following orders. On the morning of July 8, 1947, his commander, Colonel Blanchard, told him to write a press release about a recovered disc, and he did what he was told. He would insist that he never saw the debris. He was never briefed on the details, and he knew nothing more than what the public was told. He was a conduit, not a source. Even as he helped co-found the International UFO Museum in Roswell, becoming a central figure in the town's mythology, he maintained this detached, almost clerical public stance. He was the man who lit the fuse, but he claimed to have no idea what the bomb was made of. But secrets, like pressure, build over a lifetime, and sometimes, at the very end, they must be released. You are now with Walter Haut in the year 2002. He is an old man, his health is failing. He knows he does not have much time left. He sits down with a trusted friend and dictates a sworn statement, an affidavit. He signs it, has it notarized, and gives one final, explicit instruction. This document is to be sealed and is not to be made public until after his death. This is to be his final word, a truth he felt he could only tell from the safety of the grave. Walter Haut passes away in December of 2005. Shortly after, as per his instructions, the sealed envelope is opened. The contents are a bombshell that detonates half a century of carefully maintained denials. The affidavit doesn't just add a new detail to the Roswell story. It corroborates nearly every single controversial and sensational claim made by the other witnesses. It is a complete and total reversal of the story he told his entire life. You are reading the affidavit now, his final confession. He reveals that his just following orders story was a lie. a cover he was forced to maintain. The truth, he states, was far more complex and incredible. He testifies that on the morning of July 8th, before he wrote the press release, he was present at a senior staff meeting. In attendance were Colonel Blanchard and, to his surprise, the commander of the 8th Air Force, General Roger Ramey, who had flown in from Fort Worth. At this meeting, pieces of the actual debris were passed around for inspection. Holt says he handled the material himself, confirming the descriptions of the strange lightweight metal that could not be burned or dented. His testimony then goes further, directly into the territory of the second crash site. He states that Colonel Blanchard spoke openly in the meeting about a second location, an impact site, where the main body of the craft and its occupants had been found by civilian witnesses. This provides a stunning insider confirmation for the controversial Barney Barnett story. But the most shocking revelation is yet to come. Holt claims in his affidavit that after the meeting, Colonel Blanchard personally escorted him to Building 84, a heavily guarded hangar on the base. You walk with him into that hangar. The air is tense. Armed guards are everywhere. And there, under the stark hangar lights, he sees it. It is the craft itself. He describes it as a thin, metallic, egg-shaped vehicle, approximately 12 to 15 feet long and about 6 feet wide. He notes that it had no windows, no wings, no tail, no landing gear, and no visible propulsion system. It was a smooth, seamless object. And then he sees the bodies. He states that he saw at least 2 bodies lying on stretchers, partially covered by a canvas tarp. What he could see was that they were small, about the size of a 10-year-old child, and that they had unusually large heads. Finally, the affidavit blows the lid off the entire 1947 cover-up. Holt claims the whole affair, the press release and its subsequent retraction, was a calculated plan. The initial flying disc announcement was a deliberate strategy to divert public attention away from the far more significant second crash site, giving the military time to conduct its recovery of the craft and bodies in secret. The weather balloon story was the pre-planned out, the mundane explanation they could deploy once the real evidence was secured. It wasn't a mistake. It was a sophisticated piece of psychological warfare. The established fact is Walter Haut's identity, his role as the 1947 PIO, and the existence of this posthumously released affidavit. The document is real. Its contents are public record. The entire affidavit itself constitutes the fringe theory, as it's a posthumous testimony that is impossible to cross-examine. A powerful, lesser-known detail within the affidavit is Haut's specific naming of the location, Building 84. This has given researchers a tangible place to focus on, a holy grail site on the old base where the ultimate secrets were allegedly kept. This deathbed confession presents you with a critical choice of interpretation. Is this the final, clear-eyed act of a man unburdening his conscience, telling a truth he was terrified to reveal in life? Or must you consider the other possibility, that this is the final testament of an old man whose own memories had over decades of being the gatekeeper of the Roswell myth at his museum, become hopelessly entangled with the stories of others, creating a grand composite narrative that he had come to believe was his own? Walter Haut's deathbed confession seems to be the final, damning piece of testimony. A man from the inner circle, the one who wrote the original press release, claims to have seen it all. The debris, the egg-shaped craft, and the small, large-headed bodies in a hangar. You now have a seemingly overwhelming case built on the memories of dozens of individuals, from the rancher who found the debris to the officer who wrote the news bulletin about it. Yet for all these stories, for all these sworn affidavits and deathbed confessions, there is a gaping hole at the center of this mystery, a void where the proof should be. The one thing that could end all debate, that could prove the witnesses right and the government wrong, is the physical evidence itself. So you must ask the most fundamental question of all. If the United States military recovered a crashed alien spacecraft in 1947, where is it now? To answer that, you have to become a forensic accountant of evidence, tracing the chain of custody for the most priceless artifact in human history. Let's follow the trail. It begins on a remote sheep ranch, where Mac Brazel gathers a sack full of the strange material. He shows it to his family and neighbors. He then takes it to the Chaves County Courthouse and spills it onto the desk of Sheriff George Wilcox. At this point, the evidence is still in civilian hands. Then, Major Jesse Marcel arrives. The debris is handed over to the military. Marcel, accompanied by Captain Cavett, goes to the ranch and collects several carloads more. He brings a sample home, spreading it on his kitchen floor for his wife and son to see. This is the last time any of it is seen in a casual, domestic setting. From there, the evidence travels to the Roswell Army Airfield, into the possession of Colonel Blanchard. According to Walter Haut, it is viewed by senior staff and stored temporarily in Hangar 84. Then, the next crucial step. Major Marcel is ordered to fly the most compelling pieces of the debris to Fort Worth. You are on that B-29 with him, guarding boxes of what he believes is extraterrestrial technology. He lands and takes the boxes directly into the office of General Roger Ramey. He lays the pieces out on the floor, and it is here in this high-ranking general's office that the trail goes cold. This is the vanishing point. According to Marcel, he is let out of the room for a few minutes, and when he returns, the real debris is gone, replaced by the tattered remains of a weather balloon. This is the last time any primary, named witness ever lays eyes on the authentic material. So what happened in those few minutes? Where did it go? The most logical and widely accepted theory among researchers is that the real debris was immediately secured and prepared for its final journey. You have to think like the military in 1947. When you recover a piece of unknown, potentially hostile, and highly advanced foreign technology, say a new type of Soviet jet engine or a captured German rocket, you don't leave it at a regional command post. You send it to the one place in the country equipped to analyze it, the Air Materiel Command's Foreign Technology Division at Wright Field in Dayton, Ohio. Today, it's known as Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. You can picture the scene. A C-54 transport plane sits waiting on the tarmac at Fort Worth. The real debris, carefully crated and under armed guard, is loaded aboard. It takes off under the cover of night, flying the priceless cargo to the laboratories at Wright Field, a place of immense secrecy, home to the nation's top aeronautical engineers and material scientists. It is here, in legendary facilities like Hangar 18, that the material would have been subjected to every test imaginable as the government began the slow, secret process of trying to understand what it had found. The disappearance was not just complete, it was ruthlessly efficient. Not one single solitary piece of the authentic debris has ever surfaced in the 75-plus years since the event. Mac Brazel told his son that when he was finally taken back to his ranch, the military had cleaned the debris field so thoroughly that you couldn't find a piece of it as big as your fingernail. Every scrap had been picked up. Everyone who had a piece, like Sheriff Wilcox or Jesse Marcel, had it confiscated. How is it possible that in an event involving dozens, if not hundreds of people, not one person managed to pocket a tiny souvenir? Not one soldier kept a small fragment of memory foil? The evidence cleanup was absolute, leaving nothing behind but stories. The established fact is the official chain of custody up to Fort Worth. It is also a historical fact that Wright-Patterson Air Force Base was the primary Air Force intelligence and technology analysis center at the time. If such material existed, Wright-Patterson is the logical destination. A more speculative, lesser-known theory, pieced together from various second-hand accounts, suggests that the recovery was a highly compartmentalized operation involving multiple flights. One plane from Roswell allegedly carried the debris, another carried the craft, and a third carried the bodies, all flying to different secure locations to ensure that no single person or facility had the whole story. This suggests a level of operational security that was planned and executed with extreme precision. This total vanishing of the evidence leaves you with a stark, critical question. Is the complete absence of any physical proof, not one fiber, not one metallic fragment, the ultimate sign of a flawless and terrifyingly efficient government cover-up? Or is that very absence the most powerful argument that the extraordinary material, and by extension the extraordinary story, never really existed anywhere outside the fallible confines of human memory? The evidence is gone. Every scrap of memory metal, every fragment of an I-beam, and, if the stories are true, the craft and its occupants have all been swallowed by the vast, silent machinery of the national security state. This total disappearance creates a new, more profound question. If you were the President of the United States in 1947, and you were just informed that your military had recovered a crashed alien spacecraft, what would you do? This is a secret of a completely different order of magnitude. It is not a new weapon or a new spy plane. It is a world-altering, paradigm-shattering reality. The normal chain of command, the standard classifications of confidential, secret, and top secret, are all woefully inadequate. You would need to create something new, a control group, a committee that operates entirely in the shadows, with absolute authority and zero public oversight, tasked with managing the most important secret in human history. For decades, the idea of such a group was pure speculation, the stuff of conspiracy fiction. Then, in the mid-1980s, something happened that seemed to pull this shadowy committee out of the realm of theory and into the world of fact. You are now with a man named Jaime Shandera, a television producer and UFO researcher. It is December of 1984. He goes to his mailbox and finds a plain, unassuming brown paper envelope. There is no return address. Inside, there is no letter, no explanation. There is only a single roll of 35mm film. Your curiosity is piqued, just as his was. With a sense of trepidation, you take the film to be developed. When you get the prints back, you are looking at what appears to be a series of photographs of an official government document. The pages are stamped with the highest possible security classification, top secret, magic, eyes only. The document is titled, Briefing Document, Operation Majestic, 12, prepared for President-elect Dwight D. Eisenhower. It is dated November 18, 1952. It appears to be the ultimate leak, a briefing prepared for the incoming president on the nation's deepest and darkest secret. You begin to read. The document lays out a stunning secret history. It states that on September 24, 1947, just 11 weeks after the Roswell crash, President Harry S. Truman signed a secret executive order creating an ultra-secret committee. Its name, Majestic 12, or MJ-12 for short. Its purpose to oversee every aspect of the Roswell recovery and its aftermath. The document then lists the 12 members of this committee, and this is what gives the papers their chilling credibility. The members are not faceless bureaucrats. They are a veritable who's who of America's mid-century military, scientific, and intelligence elite. You see the names on the list. Dr. Vannevar Bush, the nation's top science advisor, the man who ran the Manhattan Project. James Forrestal, the very first Secretary of Defense. General Nathan Twining, the head of Air Materiel Command at Wright Field, the very place the debris was allegedly sent. General Hoyt Vandenberg, the second director of the Central Intelligence Agency. Dr. Detlev Bronk, a famous biologist and head of the National Academy of Sciences. The list goes on, a pantheon of the men who built America's post-war national security state. The document proposes that these 12 men were the sole gatekeepers of the alien secret. The briefing memo then summarizes the event that necessitated their formation. It confirms in dry official language that on July 7, 1947, a crashed disc-shaped aircraft was recovered from a remote region of New Mexico. It states that the wreckage was secured by the military and that 4 small, non-human bodies were discovered a short distance from the main impact site. The document claims that a preliminary analysis of the bodies concluded they were human-like, but that the biological and evolutionary processes responsible for their development has apparently been quite different from those observed or postulated in Homo sapiens. It confirms that the craft itself was of an extremely lightweight but incredibly strong construction. In short, the MJ-12 document, if authentic, is a complete top-secret government confirmation of the entire extraordinary Roswell story. The established fact here is the documented arrival of these papers. Researcher Jaime Shandera did receive an anonymous roll of film in 1984, and the documents, now known as the Eisenhower Briefing Document, became public, igniting one of the fiercest debates in UFO history. Their existence as artifacts is not in question. Their authenticity is. A lesser-known detail within the document is the specific cause of the crash that the alleged committee had determined. It speculates that the craft's propulsion and guidance systems may have been disrupted by powerful, experimental radar systems that the US military was testing in that area of New Mexico, causing an accidental, catastrophic failure. This adds a layer of technical-sounding plausibility and a touch of irony. The idea that our own military's search for enemies in the sky may have inadvertently brought one down. The sudden appearance of these documents, however, forces a crucial question upon you. Are you looking at the leak of the century? The ultimate smoking gun delivered by a courageous, anonymous whistleblower from deep within the government? Or is the document's very perfection, its neat confirmation of every element of the Roswell mythos, its arrival at the perfect time to stoke the fires of a revived public interest, a sign that you are looking at a brilliantly executed and highly sophisticated forgery, a piece of disinformation designed to muddy the waters and mislead everyone? You are holding what appears to be the Rosetta Stone of the Roswell incident, the majestic 12 documents. They have arrived from the shadows, an anonymous gift that seems to confirm every wild theory, every suppressed rumor, every deathbed confession. For a time in the mid-1980s, you can feel the elation in the community of UFO researchers. This is it. The case is blown wide open. The names on the committee, Vannevar Bush, James Forrestal, Hoyt Vandenberg, are unimpeachable. The language is pitch-perfect government bureaucratese. The implications are staggering. It seems for a moment that the truth has finally been delivered in a plain brown envelope. But when something seems too good to be true, it's the job of an investigator to start looking for the cracks. And it doesn't take long for the cracks in Operation Majestic 12 to appear. You join a small army of skeptics, historians, forensic document examiners, and even the FBI, as they begin to dissect these documents word by word, stamp by stamp, signature by signature. The first and perhaps most devastating blow comes from another MJ-12 document that surfaced shortly after the initial Eisenhower briefing. This document is a one-page memo, supposedly from President Truman to his Secretary of Defense James Forrestal, dated September 24, 1947, the very memo that allegedly created the MJ-12 committee. It bears the signature of Harry S. Truman. It looks real, but you are now with researchers at the National Archives, sifting through thousands of authentic, declassified Truman-era documents. And you find it. In an unrelated and completely innocuous letter from Truman to Vannevar Bush, dated October 1, 1947, is a signature. You place it side by side with the signature on the MJ-12 memo. They are not just similar, they are identical, pixel for pixel. The telltale ticks, the specific pressure points of the pen, are a perfect match. This is a forensic impossibility. No person ever signs their name the exact same way twice. The conclusion is inescapable. The signature on the MJ-12 memo is a forgery, a photographic copy lifted directly from a real, publicly available letter and pasted onto a fake document. This single, fatal flaw opens the floodgates. You start looking closer, and the anachronisms, the small details that are out of time and out of place, begin to pile up. You examine the date format on one of the memos. It reads 07 July 1947. It looks plausible, but when you compare it to hundreds of other declassified documents from the same office in the same time period, you find they used a different, standard format. It's the kind of subtle mistake a forger, working from a limited set of examples, might make. But the kind of thing a government clerk typing these documents every day never would. You look at the classification stamps. Top secret, magic, eyes only. It sounds intimidating and authentic, but again, forensic analysis of the typeface and its alignment raises red flags. It doesn't quite match the known government typewriters and stamps of the period. The deeper you dig, the more the entire edifice of Majestic 12 begins to crumble. Other, even more questionable MJ-12 documents begin to surface over the years, some with even more glaring errors, like using military jargon or postal codes that were not created until years after the documents were supposedly written. The investigation is no longer just being conducted by civilian researchers. You now see the FBI get involved. In 1988, they open an official inquiry. They acquire copies of the documents and conduct their own analysis. Their conclusion, stated in a now declassified internal memo, is blunt and unambiguous. They declare the majestic 12 documents to be completely bogus. The established fact is the FBI's official investigation and its conclusion that the documents are a forgery. Furthermore, the Truman signature on the Cutler-Twining memo, another MJ-12 document, has been forensically proven to be a photocopy of a signature from an authentic, unrelated letter, making it a demonstrable fake. The entire MJ-12 narrative is therefore built upon a foundation of proven fraud. A lesser-known detail that adds another layer to the fraud is the forensic analysis of the typewriter itself. Experts have suggested that the documents were likely created on a Smith Corona typewriter that was available during the period, but that certain key impressions and alignments are inconsistent, suggesting that the document was typed recently on an old machine, not typed in 1952 on a new one. This leads to a new and even more complex question. The MJ-12 documents are almost certainly a hoax, but they are a brilliant hoax. They are sophisticated, detailed, and were clearly created by someone with a deep knowledge of the period's history and key figures. Who would have the skill, the time, and the resources to create such a high-quality forgery, only to undermine it with subtle but ultimately discoverable flaws? Was this the work of a lone obsessive prankster? Or does the very nature of the forgery, designed to convince but also designed to eventually fail under scrutiny, point towards a deliberate act of state-sponsored disinformation, meant to discredit the entire field of UFO research by poisoning the well with a spectacular fake? You have now navigated a labyrinth of conflicting narratives. You have the powerful human testimony of the eyewitnesses. You have the cold, dismissive reports of the United States Air Force. You have a spectacular hoax film and a set of masterfully forged government documents. The deeper you go, the more complex the mystery becomes. But through it all, one question looms larger than any other. Why? Why would the government go to such extraordinary lengths to maintain a cover-up for more than 75 years? Why threaten the lives of its citizens, create elaborate cover stories, and potentially even disseminate disinformation? The common answer is to prevent social panic, to protect the fragile structures of religion and government from a reality-shattering truth. But there is another theory, one that is far more pragmatic and in many ways far more compelling. You don't go to all that trouble just to hide a secret. You do it to exploit it. Let's step back and look at the world you are in. The year is 1947. Technology is defined by propellers, vacuum tubes, and bulky mechanical calculators. Then, in the decades that follow, something extraordinary happens. Human technology takes a sudden quantum leap forward. You witness a revolution that is unprecedented in its speed and scope. In the years and decades after 1947, you see the invention and development of the transistor, the integrated circuit, the microchip that powers our entire modern world. You see the first lasers, the first fiber optic cables, night vision technology, advanced super tenacity fibers like Kevlar, and the strange, radar-absorbing composite materials that would eventually lead to stealth aircraft. This burst of innovation fundamentally reshaped human civilization. And the reverse engineering theory asks a simple, provocative question. What if that revolution wasn't entirely our own? You are now inside the most secret laboratories in the country, perhaps at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. On a sterile table in front of you are the remains of the Roswell craft. The nation's brightest minds, physicists, engineers, materials scientists, are gathered around it. Their task is not to announce this discovery to the world, but to take it apart piece by piece and figure out how it works. The theory is that the Roswell crash provided a technological windfall, a jumpstart of centuries, and that the relentless technological progress of the late 20th century was, in fact, the slow, secret reverse engineering of this alien gift. This idea remained in the realm of pure speculation until the late 1990s, when a high-ranking military officer came forward with a story that seemed to connect all the dots. His name was Lieutenant Colonel Philip J. Corso. You need to understand his background. He was a highly decorated Army intelligence officer who served on General Douglas MacArthur's staff in the Korean War, and later, in the 1960s, worked at the Pentagon in the Army's Foreign Technology Division. In his 1997 book, The Day After Roswell, Corso made a stunning claim. He said that in 1961, He was given a file cabinet containing artifacts from the 1947 Roswell crash and was tasked with a unique mission: to secretly and systematically seed this alien technology into the research and development programs of major American corporations. You listen to Corso's account. He claims that the integrated circuit was born from the discovery of silicon chips with microscopic, pre-printed circuits found in the wreckage. He says he funneled this technology to Bell Labs, giving them the conceptual breakthrough they needed to move from the transistor to the microchip. He claims that the wreckage contained thin, thread-like filaments that could transmit light, and that he passed this material along to researchers, leading directly to the invention of fiber optics. He describes the craft's skin as a metallic fabric that was invisible to radar, and says this was the origin of stealth technology: lasers, night vision, particle beams. Corso claimed that all of these world-changing inventions and more were the direct result of his secret program to back-engineer the secrets of the Roswell disk. The established fact is the undeniable technological explosion of the post-war era. The transistor was indeed invented at Bell Labs in late 1947, a key date that proponents of the theory find highly significant. The timeline of rapid innovation is a matter of historical record. The core of this section, however, is the ultimate fringe theory: the claim that this innovation was driven by reverse-engineered alien technology. The entire narrative rests almost exclusively on the uncorroborated, posthumously published claims of one man, Colonel Philip J. Corso. While his distinguished military career is a fact, his extraordinary story from the foreign technology desk has never been verified by any other source and is fiercely contested. Yet his account provides the only detailed insider narrative for how such a monumental secret could have been transformed into the technology that defines our modern lives. This raises a critical question about cause and effect. Were these incredible technological leaps the result of a secret government program to back-engineer an alien craft? Or is this theory an example of a classic logical fallacy, where we see two concurrent events, the Roswell incident and a technological boom, and incorrectly assume that one must have caused the other, ignoring the long-documented and entirely human history of painstaking research that led to each of these breakthroughs? You've been presented with a motive for the decades of secrecy: the desire to reverse-engineer a priceless piece of alien technology. It's a grand, compelling narrative that casts the United States government as the secret custodians of a cosmic gift. It assumes, however, one fundamental thing: that the object that crashed was, in fact, alien. But what if you've been looking at the puzzle all wrong? What if the most fantastic part of the story, the flying saucer, the little men, the visitors from another world, isn't the secret the government is trying to hide? What if the alien story is the cover-up? You are now looking at the Roswell incident through a different lens. You are not a UFO researcher. You are a counterintelligence analyst. Your specialty is psychological warfare. Your job is to create deceptions, to plant stories, to manage perceptions, and misdirect your enemies. From this vantage point, the events of July 1947 look less like the fumbled recovery of an alien craft, and more like a brilliantly executed, if deeply cynical, intelligence operation. The theory is this: something did crash in the New Mexico desert. The military did lock the area down and enforce a code of absolute silence. But the object wasn't from another planet. It was something terrestrial, something so secret, so sensitive, or so horrific that the truth could never be allowed to come out. And the best way to hide a secret like that is to wrap it in a story that is even more unbelievable. A story about a crashed flying saucer. So what could be a secret so dangerous that a myth about aliens would be the preferred alternative? You consider the possibilities. The first and most likely candidate is a top-secret U.S. weapons project gone wrong. Remember the time and place. You are in the cradle of America's post-war military-industrial complex. The sky above you is filled with experimental rockets, high-altitude balloons, and radical new aircraft designs. What if the crash was of a new atomic-powered vehicle, or a biological weapons test? Some of the darkest versions of this theory speculate that the crash involved human experimentation. To test the effects of radiation or extreme G-forces, the military might have used prisoners, or perhaps even disabled individuals as unwilling test subjects. A crash involving such a program revealing mutilated and perhaps mutated human bodies, would be a scandal of such magnitude it could bring down the government. How do you explain the recovery of small, strange-looking bodies? You let people believe they were aliens. There's another, even more provocative possibility. What if the craft wasn't American at all? What if it was Soviet? You can imagine the scenario. In 1947, the Cold War is just heating up. The United States believes it has total air superiority. Then a highly advanced reconnaissance craft, perhaps a jet-powered flying wing based on designs from the captured German Horten brothers, crashes on American soil. This would be a catastrophic intelligence failure, proof that the Soviets were years ahead of what was believed and that American airspace was frighteningly vulnerable. At the same time, the wreckage would be an intelligence goldmine. The US government would have two simultaneous objectives: to deny the Soviets any knowledge that their prize technology had been recovered, and to hide the terrifying truth of their vulnerability from the American people. Spreading a wild, distracting rumor about a flying saucer would be the perfect solution to both problems. It explains the intense military activity while sending Soviet intelligence on a wild goose chase. From this psychological warfare perspective, the military's actions in 1947 suddenly look not like a series of blunders, but like a masterstroke of deception. Think about the press release. First, you have Colonel Blanchard authorize the stunning flying disc announcement. This plants the seed. The idea of an extraterrestrial visitor is now in the public mind, courtesy of the military itself. Then, just a few hours later, General Ramey issues the boring, mundane weather balloon retraction. This officially kills the story, allowing the military to get on with its secret recovery work without media scrutiny. But the original, more exciting story is now out there. It festers in the local community, becomes a legend, a rumor that is far more effective at hiding the truth in the long run than a simple no comment ever could be. The historical fact that underpins this theory is Operation Paperclip, the secret US program that brought more than 1,600 Nazi German scientists, engineers, and technicians to America after World War II. This included brilliant aviation pioneers like the Horten brothers, whose flying wing designs were decades ahead of their time. The idea that the US was testing radical, unfamiliar aircraft based on their work in 1947 is not just plausible, it's highly probable. The more specific, lesser-known version of this theory, that the crash involved human test subjects, remains the darkest and most speculative corner of Roswell research, an attempt to explain the bodies without resorting to an extraterrestrial hypothesis. This entire angle of psychological warfare forces you to ask a very different kind of critical question. If the flying saucer story was a deliberately crafted cover, was it ultimately a success or a failure? It may have successfully hidden the real secret, whatever it was, for over 75 years. But in doing so, it gave birth to a global conspiracy theory that has profoundly and perhaps permanently damaged the public's trust in its own government. Did the creators of this alleged deception win the battle only to lose the war for public trust? You have traveled through a dizzying array of possibilities. You've considered the official explanation of a top-secret balloon, the extraordinary tale of a crashed alien craft, the tantalizing prospect of reverse-engineered technology, and the cynical theory of a masterful psychological warfare campaign. Each narrative is a complete world unto itself, supported by its own set of facts, witnesses, and logic. At this point, you might find yourself lost in the weeds, trying to determine which story is the true one. But now, let us take a step back from the forensic details of the case and look at what the Roswell incident has become. Because regardless of what actually fell on Mac Brazel's ranch in 1947, the story itself has taken on a life of its own. It has grown from a forgotten two-day news item into the cornerstone of modern mythology. You can see that the Roswell incident has become the foundational archetype for nearly every UFO conspiracy that has followed. It is the template, the master narrative from which so many others are cut. Think about the essential elements. You have the mysterious object falling from the sky in a remote, desolate location. You have the humble, salt of the earth civilian witness who makes the initial discovery. You have the credible military insider who sees the truth and is later forced into silence. You have the swift and ruthless government cover-up, the confiscation of evidence, and the intimidation of witnesses by shadowy men in black. You have the secret military installation, Hangar 18, Hangar 84, Area 51, where the otherworldly secrets are locked away. These tropes, which now feel so familiar, were not part of our collective narrative before 1947. Roswell wrote the script. When you watch a movie or read a book about a UFO cover-up, the story you are consuming is, in its DNA, the story of Roswell. Its influence on popular culture has been staggering. You see its fingerprints everywhere. The television series The X-Files, arguably one of the most influential shows of the 1990s, built its entire 9-season mythology on a foundation laid by the Roswell incident. The central plot, two FBI agents uncovering a vast government conspiracy to hide the truth about alien contact that began with a crashed saucer in New Mexico, is Roswell writ large. In the blockbuster film Independence Day, the secret military base Area 51 is revealed to be hiding the actual Roswell craft and its occupants, which become key to defeating the alien invasion. The image of the Roswell alien itself, the gray with its small, frail body, large head, and huge black almond-shaped eyes, has become the universal default for what an extraterrestrial looks like. This image, born from the witness descriptions and the fraudulent autopsy film, is now an instantly recognizable global icon, as familiar as Mickey Mouse or a Coca-Cola bottle. You can even see the myth made manifest by traveling to the town of Roswell, New Mexico today. You can walk its streets and witness a community that has completely and totally embraced its unique place in history. You see streetlights shaped like alien heads. You can visit the International UFO Museum and Research Center, co-founded by the key player Walter Haut himself. You can eat at a McDonald's shaped like a flying saucer. The town has built a thriving tourist economy around the event, hosting an annual UFO festival that draws thousands of visitors from around the world. Roswell has become a pilgrimage site for believers, a living monument to its own mythology, a place where the story has become more real and certainly more profitable than the historical event ever was. But perhaps the most profound and lasting impact of the Roswell story is not in our movies or our tourist traps, but in our relationship with our own institutions. You must remember that the one undisputed fact of the Roswell incident is that the United States military officially announced they had a flying disc, and then mere hours later told the world to disregard that story and accept a more mundane one. For many, this single documented act of reversal became the first concrete piece of evidence that the government could not be trusted on the subject of UFOs, and perhaps on other subjects as well. It became Exhibit A in the case for a secret-keeping shadow government. The story of Roswell helped to fuel a culture of conspiratorial thinking and a deep-seated distrust of official narratives that has since grown to encompass far more than just the question of alien visitors. It cemented the idea in the public mind that they know more than they are telling us, a legacy of suspicion that continues to shape our world in profound ways. The established fact is the undeniable cultural and economic impact the incident has had on the town of Roswell and on popular culture worldwide. The town's alien-themed identity is a real-world testament to the power of the myth. A lesser-known detail of this cultural impact is how the Roswell story has evolved over time to mirror our changing societal anxieties. The story, as it was reborn in the late 1970s and 80s post-Vietnam and post-Watergate, was infused with a new dark paranoia about government conspiracies that was absent in the more hopeful space brother narratives of the 1950s. The myth adapted to the times. This leaves you with a final philosophical question about the nature of truth itself. At this point, more than 75 years on, has the myth of Roswell become more important and more culturally real than the actual historical event? And is it even possible or desirable to untangle the two? Or has the story simply become a permanent part of our modern folklore? A tale we tell ourselves about the mysteries of the sky and the secrets of the powerful? And so, you find yourself at the end of a long and winding road, standing at a crossroads where history, memory, and mythology all converge. For 75 years, the story of Roswell has been a battlefield of competing narratives, a puzzle with 1,000 pieces but no box top to show you the final image. After examining the evidence, the witnesses, the official reports, and the endless theories, You are left with a stark choice between two fundamentally different realities. There is no middle ground. You must weigh them one last time. In one hand, you hold the case for the mundane. This is the official story, the one sanctioned by the government and supported by the historical record of Project Mogul. In this version, a top-secret high-altitude balloon array, a marvel of Cold War ingenuity designed to spy on the Soviet Union, falls from the sky. Its wreckage, a strange but entirely terrestrial collection of balsa wood, foil paper, and patterned tape, is discovered by a simple rancher who has never seen anything like it. An eager, and perhaps slightly naive, base intelligence officer makes a colossal error in judgment. The military, in its panic to protect the vital secrets of Project Mogul from its Cold War adversaries, orchestrates a swift and clumsy cover-up, silencing the witnesses and substituting the real debris with a common weather balloon. The stories of bodies and autopsies that emerge decades later are nothing more than ghosts of memory, a psychological collage of unrelated traumas, the site of anthropomorphic crash test dummies and the grim aftermath of a real-life military plane crash. In this reality, the Roswell incident is a footnote, a fascinating case study in Cold War paranoia and the incredible power of myth to grow from the fertile soil of secrecy and misunderstanding. It is ultimately a story about us. In your other hand, you hold the case for the extraordinary. This is the story told not by official reports, but by the haunted memories of the people who were there. In this version, an object not of this earth, piloted by a non-human intelligence, meets its end in the desolate expanse of the New Mexico desert. Its technology is a miracle, made of materials that defy the known laws of physics. Its occupants, small, frail beings with large heads and dark, unknowable eyes, are recovered by the United States military. A cover-up of unprecedented scale and ruthless efficiency is immediately enacted. Evidence is confiscated and hidden away in secret hangars. Witnesses are threatened into a lifetime of silence. A calculated campaign of disinformation, from a phony weather balloon story to potentially even forged Majestic 12 documents, is launched to obscure the truth. In this reality, the Roswell incident is not a footnote. It is the central, secret fact of modern history. It is the moment humanity was confronted with the staggering truth that we are not alone in the universe. A truth so profound that our leaders decided, for our own good, that we were not ready to hear it. There you have it. The two paths. One is a story of human fallibility. The other is a story of cosmic discovery and human conspiracy. After all this time, the physical evidence that could prove one side right and the other wrong is gone. The primary witnesses have all passed away, leaving us only with their recorded words and sworn affidavits. You are left in the same position as every investigator who has tackled this case. You are left with a choice. Do you trust the declassified documents and the official explanations of the institution that admittedly lied in the first place? Or do you trust the consistent, detailed, and often terrified testimony of the ordinary people who found themselves at the epicenter of an extraordinary event? What truly crashed in the New Mexico desert during that violent electrical storm in the summer of 1947? A weather balloon? A top-secret Mogul device? Or something else entirely? The final verdict rests with you. We have journeyed from a dusty sheep ranch in 1947 to the highest echelons of a secret government, chasing a truth that remains as elusive as a shadow. We've weighed the stories of humble ranchers and decorated military officers against the official reports of the most powerful government on Earth. We've seen how a simple story of strange debris can blossom into a modern myth of recovered alien craft, secret autopsies, and reverse-engineered technology that powers the very device you might be listening on right now. The Roswell incident endures because it is a perfect mystery, a labyrinth with no exit. The official explanation of Project Mogul and confused memories seems plausible, yet it requires dismissing the sworn testimony of dozens of credible people. The extraordinary tale of a crashed saucer seems to explain the evidence better, yet it requires a belief in the unbelievable and a conspiracy of breathtaking scale. The simple truth is, we still don't know. And perhaps the most enduring legacy of Roswell is the question it forces us all to ask. In the absence of absolute proof, Who do you choose to believe? Your curiosity, your skepticism, and your willingness to question are what keep these important stories alive. Thank you for joining me on this investigation. That's all for today. Stay curious, stay questioning, and I'll see you in the next file.